In the spring of 1875, Zara Montgomery stepped off a dusty stagecoach in a brutal Colorado frontier town to marry a man she'd never met, only to discover he'd been dead for weeks. Stranded with no money, no family, and a community that saw her as a burden, or worse, she faced an impossible choice. Crawl back east in disgrace, or survive in a land that had no mercy for unprotected women. Then a quiet rancher named Asher Fletcher made an unexpected offer, a marriage of convenience that would change both their lives forever. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Hartwell's general store, throwing Zara forward hard enough that her shoulder slammed into the wooden frame. Dust billowed through the open window, coating her black traveling dress in another layer of grit. She'd been wearing mourning clothes for her mother's death when she left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago. Now they just looked like everything else out here, covered in dirt, worn thin, barely holding together. "Hartwell, Colorado," the driver shouted down. "End of the line." Zara gathered her carpet bag and the small trunk that held everything she owned. Her hands shook as she climbed down, partly from the journey's rough roads and partly from nerves that had been building since Kansas. The town spread before her in stark, unforgiving detail. A single muddy street lined with weathered buildings, mountains looming in the distance, still capped with snow despite the spring thaw. The air smelled like pine and manure and something else she couldn't name. Something wild. A few people stopped to stare. 2 women outside the mercantile, their faces hard and appraising. A man loading supplies onto a wagon, his eyes moving over her in a way that made her skin crawl. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. She'd come too far to show weakness now. "Ma'am?" The driver set her trunk down with a thud. "You got somebody meeting you?" "Yes," Zara said, though her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Mr. Thomas Brennan, he should be—" "Brennan?" The driver's expression shifted. "You'd be the bride then." Something in his tone made her stomach drop. "I am. Has something happened?" The driver removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Ma'am, I think you'd better speak with Sheriff Garrett. He's just down there, past the saloon." "Why would I need to speak with the sheriff?" Zara's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. "Where's Thomas? Where's my fiancé?" "I'm real sorry, miss." The driver backed toward his coach. "The sheriff can explain it better than me." He climbed aboard and snapped the reins before she could ask anything else. The stagecoach rolled away, leaving her standing in the middle of the street with her trunk and carpet bag, aware of every pair of eyes watching her. Zara forced herself to move. The sheriff's office sat between a saloon that was doing good business despite the early hour, and a building with a faded sign that read "Assayer." She knocked once, then pushed the door open when no one answered. A man looked up from a desk covered in papers. He was maybe 40, with graying hair and lines around his eyes that suggested he'd seen more than he wanted. "Help you?" "I'm looking for Sheriff Garrett." "You found him." He stood, his gaze moving to her black dress and back to her face. "You're the woman from Pennsylvania." It wasn't a question. Zara set down her carpet bag, gripping it hard enough that her fingers ached. "I'm Zara Montgomery. I'm here to marry Thomas Brennan. The stagecoach driver said I should speak with you, but he wouldn't tell me why." Sheriff Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he came around the desk and pulled out a chair. "You'd better sit down, Miss Montgomery." "I don't want to sit down." Her voice cracked. "I want to know where Thomas is." "He's dead, ma'am. I'm sorry." The words hit her like a physical blow. Zara grabbed the edge of the desk, her knees suddenly unreliable. "What?" "There was an accident about 3 weeks back. He was working on his property, clearing timber for a new barn. A tree fell wrong, killed him instantly. 3 weeks. He'd been dead for 3 weeks while she was traveling west, imagining their meeting, rehearsing what she'd say. While she was crossing rivers and sleeping in rough station houses and telling herself this was the right choice, the only choice, he was already in the ground. "Why didn't anyone send word?" she heard herself ask. "We tried. Sent a telegram to the address he had for you, but it came back. Building was torn down, apparently. Nobody knew where you'd gone. Because she'd already left. Because she'd given up her room at Mrs. Helmsley's boarding house and sold what little she couldn't carry. because she'd been so desperate to escape Philadelphia and the creditors circling her mother's debts that she jumped at Thomas's proposal, even though they'd only exchanged 4 letters. I see. Zara's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Thank you for telling me. Miss Montgomery, is there a hotel in town? Sheriff Garrett's expression turned uncomfortable. There's the Hartwell house, but I'm not sure. That is, a woman alone. I understand. She picked up her carpet bag. I'll make other arrangements. There aren't any other arrangements. He said it gently, but the words still landed hard. This isn't Philadelphia. We've got the hotel, and we've got the boarding house that Mrs. Chen runs, but she only takes minors and ranch hands. A single woman without employment or family. He trailed off, leaving the implications hanging. Zara walked to the window, looking out at the muddy street. How much is the stagecoach fare back east? $20 to Denver. Another $50 or $60 from there to Pennsylvania, I'd reckon. She had $8.30. She'd used most of her money for the journey west, counting on Thomas to provide for her once she arrived. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. I see, she said again. Look, Miss Montgomery, I know this is hard, but you can't stay here, not like this. Maybe if you have family back east who could wire you money for the fare. I don't have family. The admission felt like pulling out her own teeth. My mother died 4 months ago. There's no one else. Sheriff Garrett rubbed his face. Then I don't know what to tell you. This town, it's not kind to women in your situation. You need to find a way home, and fast. Zara turned to face him. What happens if I can't? Best case? You end up working at the saloon, which is a hard life and a short one. Worst case, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. She left the sheriff's office and stood in the street, trying to think, trying not to panic. The afternoon sun beat down, and she was suddenly aware of how thirsty she was, how tired, how completely alone. She'd been alone since her mother died, but this was different. This was a loneliness that had teeth. You're the Brennan bride. Zara turned. One of the women from earlier stood a few feet away, her arms crossed over a faded calico dress. She was maybe 35, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. I was supposed to be, Zara said. I'm Margaret Sutton. My husband owns the feed store. She looked Zara over with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock. You got plans? I'm working on it. Margaret's expression suggested she doubted that. Word of advice, don't go to the hotel. Finn, who runs it, has a reputation. You'd be better off sleeping in the street. Then what would you suggest? I'd suggest you get on the next stage out of here, but I'm guessing you can't afford that. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You have any skills? Can you sew, cook, clean? I can do all of those things. Zara had spent the last 2 years taking in sewing and laundry to pay her mother's medical bills. Her fingers were still calloused from the work. Maybe I could use some help at the house. My youngest has been sick and I'm behind on everything. I could give you meals and a place to sleep in exchange for work, just until you figure something out. It wasn't charity. Margaret's tone made that clear. It was a business arrangement, and probably not a generous one, but it was better than the alternatives. Thank you, Zara said. I accept. Margaret nodded. Get your trunk. We're half a mile out of town. The Sutton house was a squat wooden structure with a sagging porch and chickens scratching in the dirt. Inside it was cramped and dark, smelling of old grease and damp. Margaret showed her to a corner of the kitchen where a thin pallet lay on the floor. You'll sleep here. Work starts at 5. I need the laundry done, the floors scrubbed, and meals cooked for 6. My husband and 4 boys, they eat like horses. Of course. And Zara? Margaret's voice went hard. I'm doing you a favor here. Don't make me regret it. Don't cause trouble. Don't put on airs. And don't get any ideas about my husband or sons. You understand? Heat flooded Zara's face. I understand perfectly. Margaret left her alone. Zara sat on the pallet and finally let herself cry, quietly, because even here, even now, she couldn't afford to show weakness. She cried for Thomas, who she'd never known but who'd represented hope. She cried for her mother, and for Philadelphia, and for the life she'd lost. And she cried for herself, stranded in this brutal place with nothing and no one. When the tears stopped, she unpacked her trunk and found her work dress. Then she went to start the evening meal, because that was all she could do. Survive. One day at a time. The week that followed was the hardest of Zara's life. She woke before dawn to start fires and make breakfast. She scrubbed floors and hauled water and washed clothes until her hands cracked and bled. Margaret's sons were loud and careless, tracking mud everywhere and leaving their clothes in filthy heaps. Her husband, Robert, barely acknowledged Zara's existence except to complain when the coffee wasn't hot enough. Margaret herself was relentless. Nothing Zara did was quite right. The bread was too dense. The floors weren't clean enough. She took too long with the washing. At night, Zara collapsed on her pallet, too exhausted to do anything but sleep. On Sunday, Margaret informed her they'd be attending church services. "You'll sit in the back," she said, "and you won't speak unless spoken to. People are already talking." The church was a simple wooden building with rough benches and a pulpit that looked homemade. Zara took her place in the back row, aware of the stares and whispers. She kept her eyes down and her hands folded, trying to be invisible. The Reverend was a thin man with a booming voice who preached about sin and redemption. Zara barely heard him. She was too busy counting the days until she might have enough money saved to leave. Though at the rate Margaret was paying her, which was to say, not at all, that seemed impossible. After the service, people gathered outside to talk. Zara hung back, but Margaret pulled her forward. "This is Zara Montgomery," she announced to a cluster of women. "She was meant to marry Thomas Brennan, but of course that's not possible now. She's staying with us temporarily." The women looked at Zara with expressions ranging from pity to suspicion. One of them, a blonde woman in a blue dress that was too fine for this town, spoke up. "How unfortunate for you, Miss Montgomery. What will you do?" "I'm not certain yet," Zara said carefully. "Well, you can't stay with the Suttons forever. Margaret has her own family to think about." "I'm aware of that." "Perhaps you have skills, something you could do to support yourself?" It was a trap. Zara could feel it. If she claimed too much skill, they'd resent her. If she claimed too little, they'd dismiss her. "I can sew and cook. I'm willing to work." The blonde woman exchanged glances with the others. "We'll see." Margaret steered Zara away. "That's Linda Crowley. Her husband owns the lumber mill. She thinks she's better than everyone else because she came from Denver." "She's not wrong about me staying with you," Zara said quietly. "I can't impose on your family indefinitely." "No, you can't." Margaret's tone was flat. "You need to find a husband, Zara. That's your only real option out here. There are men in town who'd take you, even without a dowry." "What kind of men?" "The kind who aren't picky." Margaret's expression was almost sympathetic. "I know it's not what you wanted, but this is the reality. You're a woman alone in a place that has no use for women like you unless you're married or working at the saloon. You need to make a choice before the choice gets made for you." That night, lying on her pallet, Zara thought about Margaret's words. She thought about the men she'd seen in town, rough, hard-looking men who stared too long. She thought about the blonde woman's dismissive tone and the way the other townspeople looked at her like she was something that had washed up on shore, unwanted and out of place. She thought about Thomas, who she'd never met but who'd offered her a way out of Philadelphia and the debts that would have swallowed her whole. He'd been a stranger, but at least he'd been a gentleman in his letters. Kind, or at least polite. Now he was dead, and she was trapped in a situation that felt like it was closing in tighter every day. The following afternoon, Margaret sent her to town to pick up supplies. Zara welcomed the errand despite the whispers it would generate. Anything was better than another day scrubbing floors under Margaret's critical eye. Hartwell's general store was busy. Zara waited her turn, acutely aware of the conversation stopping when people noticed her. She gave Mr. Hartwell Margaret's list and waited while he gathered the items. "That'll be $3.40, he said. Zara handed over the money Margaret had given her. As Hartwell counted it, the door opened and a man walked in. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains. He wore work clothes, canvas pants, a worn shirt, a vest that had seen better days. His boots were scuffed and dusty, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were gray, calm, and when they met hers for a brief second, she saw something unexpected, intelligence and maybe sadness. "Fletcher," Hartwell greeted him. "Got that order ready for you." The man, Fletcher, nodded. His gaze moved over Zara again, not in the invasive way she'd gotten used to, but with simple curiosity. Then he turned his attention to Hartwell. Zara gathered her packages and left, unsettled in a way she couldn't quite name. That evening, as she was preparing supper, Margaret came into the kitchen with an odd expression. "There's someone here to see you." Zara looked up from the potatoes she was peeling. "Me? Don't sound so surprised. It's Asher Fletcher. He's waiting on the porch." "I don't know anyone named Asher Fletcher." "You saw him at the store today." Margaret's tone turned sharp. "He's a rancher, has property about 10 miles north, keeps to himself mostly. I can't imagine what he wants with you." Neither could Zara. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the porch, her heart beating uncomfortably fast. Fletcher stood near the steps, his hat in his hands. Up close, she could see he was maybe 30, with lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. He had the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. "Miss Montgomery," he said. His voice was deep and quiet. "I apologize for calling unannounced. I wanted to speak with you about a matter of some importance." "I'm not sure what we'd have to discuss, Mr. Fletcher. I heard about your situation with Thomas Brennan and—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "And your current circumstances." Embarrassment heated Zara's face. "I see. Everyone in town has been discussing me then. It's a small town. People talk." He met her eyes directly. "I have a proposal. I'd like you to hear me out before you refuse." "What kind of proposal?" Fletcher glanced at the door, where Zara was certain Margaret was listening. "Could we walk a bit? I'd prefer to speak privately." Every instinct told Zara this was improper. She barely knew this man, but Margaret's words echoed in her mind. "You need to find a husband, or the choice will be made for you." And there was something in Fletcher's steady gaze that made her think he wasn't dangerous, just serious. "All right," she said, "but I need to stay within sight of the house." They walked toward the road, Fletcher matching his pace to hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he stopped and turned to face her. "I'm not good at this kind of thing," he said. "So I'll just say it plain. I need a wife. You need security and a place to live. I'm proposing a marriage of convenience." Zara stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I am." His expression didn't change. "I have a ranch that's too much work for one person. I need help running it. And I need—" He paused. "I need someone there, for practical reasons. You need a home and protection. We could help each other." "You don't know me." "No, but I know you're in a bad situation. I know you're willing to work. I saw you at the Suttons, and Margaret doesn't hire anyone who can't pull their weight. And I know you're desperate enough that you might actually consider this." The bluntness stung, but he wasn't wrong. Zara wrapped her arms around herself. "Why me? Why not someone from town?" "Because the women in town have other options. And because I don't want anyone with expectations." Fletcher's voice was matter-of-fact. "This would be a business arrangement. You'd have your own room. I wouldn't expect anything else. Just work, same as any ranch hand. In exchange, you'd have a home, food, protection, and my name. You'd be safe." "Safe," Zara repeated. The word felt foreign. "Safer than you are now." He looked toward the house. "Margaret Sutton is using you, and she'll throw you out when she's done. Then what? You go to the hotel, take work at the saloon, or marry whatever man makes an offer regardless of what kind of man he is? And you're different? I'm offering you a choice. It's not a good choice, maybe, but it's yours to make." Fletcher put his hat back on. "Think about it. I'll be in town tomorrow morning. If you want to accept, meet me at the church at 10. If you don't, I'll understand." He walked away before she could respond, leaving Zara standing in the dusty road with her mind spinning. That night, she barely slept. She turned Fletcher's proposal over and over, examining it from every angle. A marriage of convenience to a man she didn't know. On a ranch miles from town. It sounded like madness. But what were her alternatives? She could stay with the Suttons until Margaret tired of her, then hope another family would take her in. She could try to find work, though there was no work for unmarried women in Hartwell, except the kind that would destroy her. She could accept an offer from one of the rough men who'd been watching her with increasing interest. Or she could marry Asher Fletcher. At least Fletcher had been honest. He'd told her exactly what he wanted and what he could offer. There was something almost decent in that directness, even if the proposal itself was strange. By dawn, Zara had made her decision. It might be a mistake, It probably was a mistake. But she was out of good options, and Fletcher's offer was the least terrible of her terrible choices. She told Margaret she was going to town. "What for?" Margaret demanded. "Personal business." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "If this is about Asher Fletcher's visit yesterday." "It is." "Then you're a fool. That man lives like a hermit out there. He barely speaks to anyone, and you'd be miles from town, alone with him, with no one to turn to if things went wrong." "As opposed to my current situation?" Zara kept her voice level. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Sutton. I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm accepting Mr. Fletcher's proposal." Margaret looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Zara's expression must have stopped her. "Fine, get your things. I won't have people saying I kept you here against your will." Zara packed her trunk and carpet bag, leaving her palette neatly folded in the corner. Margaret watched from the doorway, her face unreadable. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "Maybe," Zara said, "but at least it'll be my regret." She walked to town carrying everything she owned, arriving at the church just before 10. Fletcher was already there, standing near the steps in what looked like his best shirt, still worn, but clean. "You came," he said. "I did." Zara set down her trunk. "I have conditions." His eyebrows rose slightly. "All right. I want my own space, as you said. I want to learn the work properly, not just be treated like a servant. And if this arrangement doesn't work, if either of us decides it's not tolerable, I want your word that you'll help me get back east." Fletcher considered this. "Fair enough. Anything else?" "Just one thing." Zara looked him in the eye. "I need to know why you're really doing this. You said you need help with the ranch, but you could hire someone. Why marriage?" For the first time, Fletcher's composure cracked slightly. He looked away toward the mountains. "My brother died 2 years ago. He was the one who knew how to talk to people, how to make deals with suppliers and negotiate prices. I'm not good at that. People don't trust loners out here, but they trust married men, men with families." He met her gaze again. "I need stability. I need people to stop looking at me like I'm going to disappear into those mountains and never come back. Marriage does that." It was honest enough that it hurt. Zara recognized that kind of pain, the kind that came from losing someone and having to rebuild your life in the aftermath. "All right," she said, "I accept." Fletcher nodded. "Reverend Michaels is inside. He's expecting us." The ceremony was brief and joyless. Reverend Michaels read the words in a perfunctory tone, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement, even though Fletcher had paid him well. There were no witnesses except the Reverend's wife, who watched from the front pew with open disapproval. When it was done, Zara had a ring on her finger, a simple gold band that Fletcher produced from his pocket, and a new name. She was Zara Fletcher now. The thought was surreal. Fletcher loaded her trunk onto a wagon that had seen better days. "It's about 2 hours to the ranch. We should get moving." Zara climbed onto the wagon seat and they set off. The town disappeared behind them quickly, replaced by open country. Rolling hills covered in new grass, stands of pine and aspen. The mountains always present in the distance, massive and indifferent. Fletcher didn't talk much. He pointed out a few landmarks: a creek where the fishing was good, a neighbor's boundary line, the road that led to the nearest town with a real doctor. Zara watched the landscape pass and tried not to think about what she'd just done. The ranch appeared gradually. First a fence line, then pastures with cattle grazing. Then the buildings, a barn that was sturdy but weathered, a chicken coop, a small stable, and finally the house. It was bigger than she'd expected, 2 stories with a wide porch and real glass windows. The paint was faded and the porch sagged in one corner, but it was solid. Mountains rose behind it, close enough that she could see individual trees on their slopes. "It's not much," Fletcher said, "but it's sound." He helped her down from the wagon, then carried her trunk inside. The interior was dim and sparse. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a table with 4 chairs. Everything was clean but impersonal, like a place where someone lived but didn't really inhabit. "Your room's upstairs," Fletcher said. "First door on the right. I took the one at the end of the hall. There's a 3rd room if you need storage." Zara followed him up the narrow stairs. Her room was small but decent. A bed with a quilt, a dresser, a window overlooking the pasture. It smelled like pine and dust. I'll let you settle in, Fletcher said. Come down when you're ready. I'll show you around. He left her alone. Zara sat on the bed looking around at the room that was now hers. This house, this ranch, this life. It was all hers now, in a way. Not the way she'd imagined when she left Philadelphia, but hers nonetheless. She unpacked her trunk slowly, putting her few dresses in the dresser, her mother's photograph on the nightstand. Then she went downstairs. Fletcher was waiting in the kitchen. You hungry? A bit. He nodded toward the stove. I'm not much of a cook. Usually just make stew or beans. If you can do better, I'd appreciate it. It wasn't quite a request and not quite an order. Zara looked at the supplies on the shelf. Flour, salt, dried meat, a few potatoes. Not much to work with, but more than she'd had at the Suttons. I can manage something, she said. While she cooked, Fletcher disappeared outside. She heard him chopping wood, the steady rhythm of the axe strangely comforting. When the meal was ready, a simple stew with biscuits, she called him in. They ate in silence. The stew wasn't her best work, but Fletcher ate 2 bowls without complaint. When he finished, he looked at her directly. Thank you, he said. That was good. You're welcome. More silence. Then Fletcher stood and started clearing the dishes. I'll show you the animals tomorrow. Chickens need feeding morning and evening. Cows need milking. There's a vegetable garden out back that needs work. It got away from me after my brother died. If you can bring it back, we'd eat better. All right. I work dawn to dusk most days. Fences always need mending, cattle need tending. If you need anything in town, we go on Saturdays usually. Otherwise, we're here. He paused. It's isolated. Some people find that hard. I'll manage, Zara said. Fletcher looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. I believe you will. That night, Zara lay in her bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Wind in the pines. Cattle lowing in the distance. Somewhere, an owl called. It was strange and lonely and absolutely nothing like Philadelphia. But it was hers. Whatever this life turned out to be, she'd chosen it. She'd made the decision herself, not had it forced on her by debt or circumstance or desperation, or at least she'd chosen which desperation to follow. Zara pulled the quilt up and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd start learning this new life. Tonight, she just needed to rest, and that's what she did. Morning came too early. Zara woke to darkness and the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Fletcher already up, already working. She dressed quickly in the dim pre-dawn light, her fingers clumsy on the buttons of her work dress. The house was cold enough that she could see her breath. Downstairs, Fletcher was building up the fire in the stove. He glanced at her but didn't say good morning, just nodded toward the door. Chickens first, he said. I'll show you. The air outside bit through her shawl. Frost covered everything, turning the world silver and brittle. Zara followed Fletcher to the chicken coop, a ramshackle structure leaning slightly to one side. Inside, maybe 20 hens roosted on rough-hewn perches, their feathers fluffed against the cold. Feed's in that barrel, Fletcher said, pointing. 2 scoops morning and evening. Check for eggs while you're at it. Some of them like to hide nests in the corners. He left her to it. Zara scattered the feed and watched the chickens descend in a flurry of feathers and sharp pecks. She found 7 eggs, warm against her palm. One hen tried to bite her when she reached under it. She pulled back with a yelp, then tried again, more carefully this time. By the time she got back to the house, Fletcher had coffee going. He poured her a cup without asking, then started pulling on his coat. Cows are in the barn, he said. 2 milk cows, Bessie and Ruth. I'll handle them today so you can watch. Tomorrow, you'll do it. The barn smelled like hay and animals, and something darker underneath, manure and dirt and sweat. The cows were massive up close, their breath steaming in the cold air. Fletcher pulled up a stool and sat beside the one called Bessie, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Milk hissed into the bucket in steady streams. You have to be firm but gentle, he said without looking at her. They'll kick if you spook them or if you're too rough. And watch the tail. They'll switch it in your face if they're annoyed. Zara watched, trying to memorize the rhythm and motion. When Fletcher finished with Bessie, he moved to Ruth. Your turn tomorrow, he said again. After the milking, he showed her how to feed the cattle in the pasture, how to check the water troughs, how to distribute hay. The work was physical in a way she wasn't used to. By the time they went back inside for breakfast, her arms ached and her hands were stiff with cold. She made eggs and biscuits while Fletcher sat at the table, going over a ledger. He wrote slowly, carefully, like someone who hadn't had much schooling but had taught himself through sheer necessity. "We need supplies from town Saturday," he said. "Flour, salt, sugar if they have it. I'll make a list." "All right." He looked up. "You did fine this morning, but it's going to be harder than you think. This isn't Philadelphia." "I know that." "Do you?" His tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. "You're going to be sore tomorrow. Day after that, you'll be even more sore. Your hands are going to crack and bleed from the cold and the work. And this is spring. Wait until winter." Zara set his plate down harder than she intended. "I'm not fragile, Mr. Fletcher. I spent 2 years doing laundry and sewing 16 hours a day to pay my mother's medical bills. I know what hard work is." Something shifted in his expression. "Fair enough. And it's Asher. We're married. Might as well use first names." "Asher," she repeated. It felt strange on her tongue. "Zara, see," he said, testing it the same way. Then he went back to his ledger, and the moment passed. The days that followed blurred together into an exhausting routine. Zara woke before dawn, fed the chickens, learned to milk the cows with Asher correcting her grip and angle until her wrist screamed. She cooked meals with whatever was available, which wasn't much. She hauled water from the pump until her shoulders burned. She learned to chop wood, though her aim was terrible, and Asher had to resplit half of what she'd done. He was patient in his way, but not gentle. When she did something wrong, he showed her the right way once, maybe twice. After that, he expected her to figure it out. He didn't coddle her or make allowances. She was a ranch hand now, and ranch hands learned fast or got hurt. On the third day, she tried to move a fence post that was heavier than it looked. It slipped and caught her thumb, splitting the skin. Blood welled up immediately. Asher barely looked at it. "Pump's over there. Clean it and wrap it. There's cloth in the kitchen." "It hurts," she said, then immediately regretted it. She sounded like a child. "It will." He picked up the post she'd dropped. "Next time, ask for help with the heavy ones." That night, her thumb throbbed so badly she could barely sleep. She heard Asher moving around downstairs, then his footsteps on the stairs. A soft knock on her door. "You awake?" "Yes." He opened the door a crack, holding a small tin. "For your hand. It'll help with the pain and keep infection out." Zara sat up, and he came in, setting the tin on the nightstand. In the lamplight, his face looked tired. He opened the tin, some kind of salve that smelled like pine and something medicinal, and held out his hand. "Let me see." She gave him her injured hand. His fingers were calloused and warm as he unwrapped the cloth, examined the split skin, then applied the salve with surprising gentleness. He wrapped it again with clean cloth, his movements efficient. "Thank you," Zara said quietly. "You'll have more injuries before you get used to this. Everyone does." He stood to leave, then paused. "You're doing better than I expected." It wasn't much of a compliment, but coming from Asher, it felt like one. After he left, Zara lay back down, her hand tingling from the salve. She was exhausted and sore and far from anything she'd ever known, but something small and stubborn inside her refused to break. Saturday came, and they rode into town for supplies. The wagon rattled over rough roads, Asher silent beside her. Zara watched the landscape roll past. Endless grass and distant mountains, and sky so big it made her feel tiny. In Hartwell, people stared. Word had spread about her marriage to Asher Fletcher, and the reactions ranged from shocked to scandalized. Margaret Sutton stood outside the feed store, her expression sour. "Mrs. Fletcher," she said with heavy emphasis, "how unexpected to see you." "Mrs. Sutton," Zara kept her voice level, "I hope you're finding ranch life to your liking." "I am, thank you." "Thank." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Asher Fletcher is a hard man to live with, quiet as a tomb and twice as cold. You'll regret this arrangement before summer's out." "That's my concern, not yours." Zara moved past her into the store. Inside, she gave Mr. Hartwell the list while Asher talked to a man about cattle prices. Hartwell filled the order with barely concealed curiosity. "Heard you married Fletcher," he said. "That was quick. Circumstances required it." He wrapped the flour in brown paper. "Well, at least you're out of town. Tongues were wagging something fierce about you staying with the Suttons." The implication stung, but Zara refused to show it. She paid and carried the supplies to the wagon, where Asher was loading feed sacks. "Ready?" he asked. Yes. They left town without further conversation. On the way back, Asher finally spoke. Margaret Sutton say something to you. Nothing worth repeating. She's a bitter woman, lost 2 children to fever years ago. It hardened her. He glanced at Zara. Don't let her get under your skin. People here talk because they have nothing better to do. I noticed. It'll die down. Eventually they'll find something else to gossip about, and we'll just be the quiet couple on the North Ranch. He paused. You handled her well. Zara looked at him, surprised. Asher's eyes stayed on the road, but there was something almost approving in his tone. Thank you, she said. That night she made stew with the fresh vegetables they'd bought. Asher ate in his usual silence, but when he finished, he cleared his plate and actually washed it himself. A small gesture, but the first time he'd done so. I'm going to check the fence line tomorrow, he said. North pasture. You should come. Need to teach you the property boundaries. All right. They rode out after morning chores, Asher on a bay gelding and Zara on a gray mare he'd saddled for her. The mare was old and gentle, which was good because Zara's riding skills were mediocre at best. She clung to the saddle as they climbed into rougher terrain, following fence lines that seemed to go on forever. Asher showed her landmarks, a lightning-struck pine that marked the northeast corner, a creek that served as the eastern boundary, a pile of rocks where his property met the neighbors. He spoke more than usual, explaining the land in a way that suggested he knew every inch of it. My father built this ranch, he said at one point. Started with nothing, just a land grant and determination. My brother and I grew up working every piece of this ground. He looked out over the pasture. When my brother died, I thought about selling, leaving, but I couldn't. This is all I know. It was the most personal thing he'd said to her. Zara studied his profile, the set of his jaw, the way his eyes tracked the horizon like he was always watching for something. Why did your brother die? She asked quietly. Fever. Came on fast. He was gone in 3 days. Asher's voice went flat. We were snowed in, couldn't get to town for the doctor. By the time the roads cleared, it was too late. I'm sorry. Yeah. He turned his horse. We should head back. Storm's coming. Zara looked at the sky, which seemed clear to her, but within an hour, clouds had gathered on the horizon. By the time they got back to the ranch, wind was whipping through the trees and the temperature had dropped sharply. Get inside, Asher said, already moving toward the barn. I need to secure the animals. Zara helped him, working frantically to get the chickens into their coop and the cows into the barn. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance. They made it inside just as the first drops fell. Within minutes, it was a downpour, rain hammering the roof and wind rattling the windows. Asher built up the fire while Zara lit lamps. The house felt small and fragile against the storm's fury. This'll last a while, Asher said. Might lose some shingles, but the house is sound. Lightning flashed, turning everything white for a split second. Thunder followed so close it shook the walls. Zara flinched despite herself. You afraid of storms? Asher asked. No, just not used to them like this. Another flash. Another crack of thunder. The lights flickered. Asher moved to the window, watching the rain sheet across the glass. Could be worse. Could be hail. That'll tear up crops and kill livestock if they're caught outside. Has that happened? Once. Lost half the herd. Took 3 years to build back. He said it casually, but Zara heard the weight underneath. 3 years of work and deprivation to recover from a single night of bad weather. They ate a cold supper, bread and cheese, nothing that required the stove, and sat by the fire as the storm raged outside. For a while, neither spoke. Then Asher looked at her directly. Why'd you really come west? He asked. Most women don't travel alone to marry strangers unless they're desperate. What were you running from? Zara considered not answering, but the storm and the firelight and the strange intimacy of being trapped together made her honest. Debt, she said. My mother was sick for 2 years before she died. The doctors couldn't help, but they kept trying. By the end, I owed more money than I could ever pay back. They were going to take everything, our furniture, my mother's things, everything. I had nothing left to sell except myself, I suppose. So you answered Thomas Brennan's advertisement. Yes. He seemed kind in his letters. And I thought, I don't know what I thought, that starting over somewhere new would be better than staying in Philadelphia and drowning slowly. She looked at Asher. Why did you choose me? You could have asked someone from town. I told you, they have expectations. That's not the whole truth. Asher was quiet for a long moment. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face in stark relief. My brother's wife left after he died. Couldn't handle the isolation, the work, the loneliness. She went back to her family in St. Louis, and I never saw her again. He stared into the fire. I didn't want someone who'd expect me to be something I'm not. Someone who'd want romance and courtship and all those things I'm no good at. You needed practical help. I needed practical help. It made sense. That's very practical, Zara said. That's what we agreed to. Yes, it is. But sitting there in the firelight with the storm raging outside and nothing between them but honesty, it felt like something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore, not quite. They were two people who'd made a desperate bargain and were somehow managing to keep it. The storm lasted through the night. Zara woke once to thunder so loud it felt like the world was ending, but she forced herself back to sleep. In the morning, she found Asher already outside, surveying the damage. One section of fence was down. Several shingles had blown off the barn roof. A tree had fallen near the chicken coop, missing it by inches. But overall, they'd been lucky. Could have been worse, Asher said, echoing his words from the night before. We'll spend today on repairs. They worked side by side, hammering boards and clearing debris. Zara's hands were blistered and her shoulders screamed, but she didn't complain. She was learning that complaining didn't change anything out here. You just did the work and moved on. By afternoon, they'd repaired the fence and cleared the fallen tree. Asher climbed onto the barn roof to replace the shingles while Zara held the ladder steady. She watched him work, noting the economical way he moved, no wasted motion. He'd been doing this his whole life. When he climbed down, he looked at her with something that might have been approval. You're stronger than you look. I have to be. Yeah. He picked up the tools. You do. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. Summer arrived properly, bringing heat and long days and work that seemed endless. Zara learned to plant the vegetable garden, coaxing seeds into rows and watering them until her back ached. She learned to preserve food, to churn butter, to mend everything that broke, because out here, nothing could be wasted. She got better at milking the cows, though Ruth still kicked occasionally. She learned to read the weather, to sense when rain was coming or when the wind meant a storm. She learned to handle the chickens, to fix fence posts, to harness the horses. Her hands became calloused and rough. Her skin tanned despite the bonnet she wore. Her arms developed muscle she'd never had in Philadelphia. She was transforming, becoming someone she barely recognized, Asher noticed. One evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, he said, "You've taken to this life better than I expected. Did you think I'd fail? I thought you might give up. Most people from back east do. It's harder than they imagine." I didn't have anywhere to give up to, Zara said. This is it. I have to make it work. Still, you could have demanded I take you back to town, could have made both our lives miserable. He looked at her. You didn't. Neither did you. It was true. Asher had been fair, patient when she struggled, and he'd never once treated her with disrespect. He was quiet and solitary and sometimes maddeningly uncommunicative, but he wasn't cruel. And out here, that counted for something. They fell into a partnership of sorts. Asher handled the heavy work, building, repairing, managing the cattle. Zara took on the house, the garden, the smaller animals, the cooking. They moved around each other with increasing ease, learning each other's rhythms and habits. She learned that he woke at the same time every morning, that he took his coffee black and strong, that he read in the evenings when he had time. Old books, mostly about ranching and animal husbandry. She learned that he was methodical about everything, that he planned his work weeks in advance, that he wasted nothing. He learned that she sang quietly while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, that she was stubborn about finishing tasks even when she was exhausted, that she had nightmares sometimes, waking with gasps she tried to muffle. One night, after a particularly bad dream, she came downstairs for water and found him sitting at the table, working on accounts by lamplight. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Bad dream." She poured water from the pitcher, her hands shaking slightly. "About Philadelphia?" "About my mother. About being too late to help her." Zara sat down across from him. I keep thinking if I'd worked harder, found more money somehow. You couldn't have saved her, Asher said. His voice was gentle. Sounds like she was sick beyond what doctors could fix. That's not your fault. Logically, I know that, but you feel it anyway. He set down his pencil. I felt that way when my brother died. Like if I'd noticed the fever sooner, if I'd gotten him to town faster, if I'd done something different, he'd still be here. Do you still feel that way? Sometimes. Less than I did. He met her eyes. It gets easier. Not better exactly. Just easier to carry. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the lamp flickering between them. Finally, Asher stood. Try to get some sleep, he said. We've got a full day tomorrow. Asher, she said as he reached the stairs. He turned. Thank you for understanding. He nodded and disappeared upstairs. Zara finished her water and returned to her room, feeling slightly less alone. By midsummer, the garden was thriving. Zara spent her mornings weeding and watering, watching the vegetables grow with a satisfaction that surprised her. She'd never grown anything in Philadelphia. Seeing the results of her work, tangible, immediate, nourishing, felt almost miraculous. One afternoon, as she was picking beans, she heard hoofbeats. She looked up to see a man riding up the path, someone she didn't recognize. He was young, maybe 25, with sandy hair and an easy smile. Afternoon, he called out. You must be Mrs. Fletcher. I am. Zara straightened, shading her eyes. Can I help you? Name's Daniel Garrett. My father's the sheriff in Hartwell. I'm looking for Asher. Is he around? He's checking the cattle in the west pasture. Should be back soon. Daniel dismounted. Mind if I wait? I've been riding since dawn. Of course. Would you like water? That'd be appreciated. Zara brought him water from the pump and they sat on the porch. Daniel was friendly and talkative, a stark contrast to Asher's taciturn nature. So you're the woman who married Asher Fletcher on 2 days' acquaintance, he said with a grin. That took courage. Or desperation. Maybe both. He drank deeply. How are you finding ranch life? It's hard work, but I'm managing. Asher's a good man, quiet but decent. He helped my father track down some horse thieves last year, refused payment, said he was just doing what neighbors do. Daniel looked around the property. Place looks better than last time I was here. Garden's coming in nice. Thank you. They talked easily until Asher appeared, riding in from the west. His expression tightened when he saw Daniel, but he dismounted and shook the younger man's hand. Daniel, what brings you out here? Business. Dad sent me to ask if you'd heard anything about cattle rustling up north. There's been reports of missing stock from 3 ranches in the past month. Asher's jaw tightened. Haven't seen anything, but I'll keep watch. Appreciate it. We're trying to get ahead of this before it gets worse. Daniel glanced at Zara. Your wife made me feel welcome. You're a lucky man, Asher. I know, Asher said, and something in his tone made Zara look at him sharply, but his expression was unreadable. After Daniel left, Asher was quieter than usual. At supper, he barely spoke. Finally, Zara set down her fork. What's wrong? Nothing. That's not true. Asher looked at her, then away. Rustlers are bad news. If they're working this area, we could lose stock. And if they come onto the property... He didn't finish, but Zara understood. Out here, rustlers didn't just steal cattle. They'd hurt anyone who got in their way. What can we do? Be careful, keep your eyes open. I'll start riding the fence line more often. He met her gaze. If you see anyone unfamiliar on the property, anyone at all, you get inside and lock the doors. Don't try to confront them. All right. That night, Asher checked all the locks twice. Zara heard him moving around the house long after she went to bed, making sure everything was secure. It should have frightened her, but instead it made her feel oddly protected. Asher took his responsibilities seriously. That included her safety. The next few weeks, tension simmered beneath the surface. Asher rode out early and came back late, checking fences and counting cattle. He taught Zara how to load and fire the rifle he kept above the mantel. I don't want you to need this, he said. But if something happens, you need to be able to protect yourself. Zara's first shot went wide by several feet. The second was better. By the 10th, she could hit the target Asher had set up near the barn. Her shoulder ached from the recoil, but she kept practicing until Asher nodded approval. That'll do, he said. Remember, you only use it if you have no choice. I understand. One evening, Asher came back from town with news. They caught two of the rustlers. Daniel said they've been working the area for months, got maybe 50 head of cattle from various ranches. Will that stop it? Should. There might be others, but most rustlers work in small groups. With two caught, the rest will probably move on. He looked relieved. We got lucky. Didn't lose any stock. That night, the tension finally broke. Asher actually smiled at something Zara said. A rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. She realized she'd never really seen him smile before. It made him look younger, less burdened. What? He asked, catching her staring. Nothing. Just, you should smile more often. Not much to smile about most days. Maybe, but it suits you. He looked embarrassed and changed the subject, but Zara noticed he seemed lighter after that. The rustler scare had passed, the ranch was thriving, and they'd made it through another challenge together. August brought blazing heat. The work became brutal, watering the garden twice a day to keep it from dying, hauling water for the animals, working in temperatures that made thinking difficult. Zara tied her hair back and rolled up her sleeves and kept going because there was no alternative. One afternoon, she was working in the garden when dizziness hit her. The world tilted, and she grabbed a fence post to steady herself. Zara? She looked up to see Asher striding toward her, concern on his face. I'm fine, just got dizzy for a moment. You're working too hard in this heat. He took her arm. Come inside. You need to rest. The garden can wait. Come on. Inside, he made her sit while he brought water and a cool cloth for her forehead. His hands were gentle as he pressed the cloth to her temples. You have to be more careful, he said. Heat like this can kill you if you're not careful. I'm sorry. I just wanted to finish. Zara. His voice was firm. The garden doesn't matter if you collapse. Nothing matters that much. She looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his tone. He was genuinely worried. The realization hit her hard. Somewhere along the way, this practical arrangement had become something more. He cared. Not romantically, maybe, but he cared whether she lived or died beyond just losing a ranch hand. I'll be more careful, she said quietly. See that you are. He stood, but his hand lingered on her shoulder for just a moment. Rest. I'll handle the evening chores. After he left, Zara sat in the cool kitchen, the cloth pressed to her forehead, and thought about the man she'd married. He wasn't warm or demonstrative. He didn't say sweet things or make romantic gestures, but he'd just shown more genuine care than anyone had in years. Maybe this strange arrangement was working better than either of them had expected. By September, the heat had broken and the ranch settled into the rhythm of harvest. Zara spent long days preserving vegetables, putting up jars of beans and tomatoes and pickles to last through winter. Her back ached constantly, but every jar represented security, food when the snow came and nothing grew. Asher brought in the last of the hay, building stacks in the barn that would feed the cattle through the cold months. They worked in comfortable synchronization now, each knowing what needed to be done without discussion. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Asher said, You've done well. The ranch is in better shape than it's been in 2 years. We both did it. No, I kept it going. You made it thrive. There's a difference. He looked at her. I wanted to say thank you, and I'm glad you're here. It was the closest thing to sentimentality she'd ever heard from him. Zara felt warmth spread through her chest. I'm glad too, she said. I didn't expect that, but I am. They sat in silence as darkness fell, and for the first time since arriving in Colorado, Zara felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt home. October arrived with a bite in the air that promised early snow. Zara woke one morning to find frost covering the windows in delicate patterns, beautiful and ominous. Asher was already downstairs stoking the fire higher than usual. Winter's coming early, he said when she came down. I can feel it. We need to get the cattle moved to the lower pasture today, closer to the barn. And we should slaughter one of the pigs soon, get the meat cured before the cold really hits. Zara had known this was coming, but the reality of it still made her stomach turn. She'd helped tend the pigs all summer, fed them scraps, watched them grow. Now one would become their winter food supply. Which one? She asked. The smaller boar. He's not good for breeding, and he's big enough. Asher looked at her carefully. You don't have to help with that part if you don't want to. No, I should learn. She poured coffee with hands that wanted to shake. If something happened to you, I'd need to know how to do it myself. Nothing's going to happen to me. You can't promise that. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. You're right. I'll show you, but it's not pleasant work. It wasn't. Asher made it as quick and clean as he could, but Zara still had to turn away when the knife came out. The pig's squeals cut off abruptly, and then there was only the sound of Asher working, butchering the carcass with practiced efficiency. Blood steamed in the cold air. You all right? He asked at one point. Yes. Zara forced herself to watch, to learn. This was survival. Sentiment was a luxury they couldn't afford. By afternoon, they had meat hanging in the smokehouse and blood-soaked ground that would freeze by morning. Zara scrubbed her hands until they were raw, but she could still smell iron and death. That night, she made pork for dinner, the first meat from their slaughter. It felt both sacred and terrible, eating something she'd cared for. Asher ate without comment, but he watched her across the table. First time is always hard, he said finally. It gets easier. Does it? No, but you get used to it. The honesty was almost worse than a lie would have been. Zara pushed her plate away, no longer hungry. A week later, the first snow fell. Not the dusting that had melted by noon, but real snow that stayed, covering everything in white. Zara stood at the window watching it fall, remembering Philadelphia winters where snow meant dirty streets and cold rooms, not this pristine transformation of the landscape. Beautiful, isn't it? Asher said, coming to stand beside her. And dangerous. That too. He was close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from him. We're prepared, though. Enough food put up, enough wood cut, we'll be fine. The we still surprised her sometimes. They'd become a unit somewhere along the way, partners in survival. When had that happened? When had this stopped being his ranch and become theirs? Saturday came, and despite the snow, they rode to town for final supplies before winter locked them in. The trip took longer than usual, the horses picking their way carefully through drifts. In Hartwell, people moved with purpose, everyone stocking up before the worst weather hit. Inside the general store, Zara was loading flour and salt into their wagon when a woman's voice called out, Zara? Zara Montgomery? She turned to see a face from her past. Helen Winters, a woman she'd known slightly in Philadelphia. Helen looked prosperous in a traveling suit that must have cost more than Zara earned in a year at the boarding house. Helen, Zara's voice came out strangled. What are you doing here? Oh, my husband has business in Denver. We're staying there for a few months. Helen looked Zara over, taking in the worn work dress, the rough hands, the wind-burned face. I heard through mutual acquaintances that you'd come west to marry. How adventurous of you. The word adventurous dripped with condescension. Zara felt heat rise to her face. Yes, I married. I live on a ranch north of here. A ranch? Helen's laugh was brittle. You? The girl who fainted at the sight of blood? Who'd never done a day's physical labor in her life? She shook her head. How on earth are you managing? I manage just fine. Do you? Helen moved closer, lowering her voice. Zara, you don't have to pretend with me. If you're in a difficult situation, if this marriage was a mistake, there are ways out. My husband knows people. We could help you get back east, find proper employment. I don't need help. Zara's voice came out harder than intended. I'm exactly where I want to be. Living in isolation with a stranger? Doing manual labor? This isn't you, Zara. This is just desperation wearing a different dress. The words hit like a slap, because part of Zara wondered if Helen was right. Had she really built a life here, or was she just surviving? Had she actually changed, or was she playing a role until something better came along? Zara? She turned to see Asher in the doorway, snowflakes caught in his dark hair. He looked at Helen, then at Zara, reading the tension instantly. Everything all right? Fine. Zara's voice shook slightly. Helen, this is my husband, Asher Fletcher. Asher, this is Helen Winters. We knew each other in Philadelphia. Asher nodded politely. Ma'am. Then to Zara. We should go. Storm's getting worse. Of course. Zara moved toward him, desperate to escape Helen's pitying eyes. Think about what I said, Helen called after her. You have options, Zara. You don't have to stay in a situation just because you made a choice in desperation. Outside, Asher helped Zara onto the wagon without speaking. They were halfway out of town before he finally asked, "What was that about?" "Nothing, just someone from my old life." Didn't sound like nothing. Zara pulled her coat tighter. "She thinks I made a mistake, coming here, marrying you. She thinks I'm wasting my life. What do you think?" The question hung in the cold air. Zara looked at the mountains in the distance, at the landscape that had become familiar over the months. She thought about her calloused hands and aching muscles. She thought about the garden she'd grown, the skills she'd learned, the quiet companionship she'd found with the silent man beside her. "I think she doesn't understand," Zara said finally. "I think she sees what I've lost and can't see what I've gained." "What have you gained?" She looked at him. "Purpose. Competence. A life that's mine, not one someone else planned for me." She paused. "That probably sounds foolish." "No." Asher's voice was quiet. "It sounds honest." They rode in silence the rest of the way home. But that night, as Zara lay in bed listening to wind howl around the house, Helen's words echoed in her mind. Was she really content, or had she just convinced herself to accept what she couldn't change? Did she actually care for Asher, or was she grateful to him for saving her from worse options? She didn't have answers, and that uncertainty gnawed at her through the long, dark hours until dawn. The next few days, Zara threw herself into work with almost frantic energy. She reorganized the pantry, scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, mended clothes that had only minor tears. Asher watched but didn't comment, giving her space to work through whatever was bothering her. On the fourth day, he found her in the barn, mucking out stalls in the freezing cold, even though it could have waited. "Zara, stop!" She kept shoveling. "I'm almost done." "Zara." He took the shovel from her hands. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. That woman in town said something that's been eating at you ever since. So yes, there is." He leaned the shovel against the wall. "What did she say?" "I told you. She thinks I made a mistake. And you're wondering if she's right." Zara looked away. "Maybe." "About what specifically? About coming west? About marrying me? About staying? All of it. I don't know." She sat on a hay bale, suddenly exhausted. "Helen was right about one thing. I was desperate. I married you because I had no other options. And now I'm here, and I don't know if I'm actually happy or if I've just gotten used to being trapped in a different kind of cage." Asher was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "You're not trapped. You never were. I told you from the start, if this doesn't work, I'll help you get back east. That offer still stands." "Does it?" "Yes." He sat beside her on the hay bale, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I won't lie and say I want you to go. I don't. You've made this place better, made my life better. But I didn't marry you to make you miserable. If you're unhappy, if you want to leave, I'll understand." Zara looked at him, really looked at him. His face was serious, open in a way it rarely was. He meant every word. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "From you? From this? From us? We said this was practical, a business arrangement. Is that still all it is to you?" Asher didn't answer right away. He stared at his hands, rough and scarred from years of work. "When I asked you to marry me, it was practical. I needed help. You needed security. That was the deal. And now? Now, I don't know." He finally met her eyes. "Somewhere along the way, it stopped being just practical. You're not just a ranch hand to me, Zara. You're—" He trailed off, struggling for words. "I'm not good at this. Feelings, talking about them. My brother was the one who knew how to say things. I just know how to work." "Try," Zara said softly. He took a breath. "You're important to me. I look forward to talking with you in the evenings. I worry when you work too hard. I like the way you sing when you think I can't hear you. I like having you here." He paused. "Is that enough?" It was more than Zara had expected, more than she'd dared hope for from this reserved, solitary man. "Yes," she said, "that's enough." "What about you? What do you want?" Zara thought about Helen's pitying expression, about Philadelphia and the life she'd left behind. She thought about the garden she'd grown and the skills she'd learned and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. She thought about evenings on the porch with Asher, about the way he'd cared for her injured hand, about the small moments of connection they'd built over months of living together. "I want to stay," she said. Not because I have nowhere else to go, because this is where I want to be, with you. Something shifted in Asher's expression. Relief, maybe, or happiness. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. I'm glad, he said simply. They sat there in the cold barn, hands clasped, while snow fell outside and cattle shifted in their stalls. It wasn't romantic or dramatic, but it was real, and that made it worth more than any grand gesture. Winter deepened. Days grew short and brutal, temperatures dropping so low that water in the buckets froze solid overnight. Zara and Asher worked together to keep the animals alive, breaking ice on water troughs, distributing extra hay, checking constantly for signs of frostbite or illness. One morning, Asher came in from checking the cattle with a grim expression. One of the cows is sick. Bessie. She's not eating and her breathing sounds wrong. They spent the day trying everything they could think of, warm mash, medicine from town, wrapping her in blankets. But by evening, Bessie was worse. Her breathing came in harsh, rattling gasps. She's not going to make it, Asher said quietly. Best thing now is to end it quick, so she doesn't suffer. Can't we do anything else? No, I've seen this before. It's lung sickness. Once it gets this far, there's no coming back. He looked at Zara. I'm sorry. I know you liked her. Zara had milked Bessie every morning for months. She'd talked to the cow while she worked, confided worries and hopes to an animal that couldn't judge her. Losing her felt like losing a friend. I'll do it, Asher said. You don't have to watch. No, I'll stay with her. Zara stroked Bessie's neck, feeling the labored rise and fall of her breathing. She shouldn't be alone. Asher nodded and went to get his rifle. When he came back, Zara stepped aside but kept her hand on Bessie's warm flank. The shot echoed in the barn, shockingly loud, and then there was silence. That night, Zara cried. She tried to do it quietly in her room, but Asher must have heard because he knocked softly on her door. Can I come in? Yes. He sat on the edge of her bed, not touching her but present. I'm sorry about Bessie. It's stupid to cry over a cow. No, it's not. She was part of our lives. It's okay to grieve her. Zara wiped her eyes. Everything dies out here, doesn't it? The animals, the plants in winter, people. It's all so fragile. Yeah, it is. Asher was quiet for a moment. But things also survive. We survived. We made it through summer and fall, and we'll make it through winter. Life's fragile, but it's also stubborn. It keeps going. Is that supposed to be comforting? I don't know. Maybe. He finally reached out and took her hand. All I know is we're here, we're alive, and we're facing it together. That counts for something. Zara squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the simple contact. Thank you for staying. Where else would I go? He said it like it was obvious. This is my room. She laughed despite herself, a watery sound, but genuine. I meant thank you for being here, for understanding. I know what you meant. He stood but didn't let go of her hand. Try to sleep. Morning comes early. After he left, Zara lay in the darkness feeling the warmth where his hand had been. Something was changing between them, had been changing for months. The practical arrangement was becoming something else, something neither of them had planned but both were starting to want. Christmas came, though they barely observed it. Asher cut a small pine and brought it inside, and Zara made decorations from scraps of cloth and dried berries. It looked pitiful compared to the elaborate trees she remembered from Philadelphia, but it was theirs. She gave Asher a new shirt she'd sewn in secret, working on it late at night after he'd gone to bed. He gave her a wooden box he'd carved, smooth and beautiful, with her initials on the lid. For your things, he said awkwardly. I know you don't have many, but when you do, you'll have somewhere to keep them. Zara ran her fingers over the carved letters. It's beautiful. You made this? Worked on it in the barn when you were busy with other things. He looked embarrassed. My brother was the woodworker. I'm not as skilled, but I tried. I love it. And she meant it. The shirt she'd given him was practical. This was personal, thoughtful in a way that touched her. That night, they sat by the small tree and talked. Asher told her stories about Christmases when his brother was alive, when their mother was still living and would make elaborate meals despite their poverty. Zara told him about Philadelphia, about her mother and the good years before sickness and debt destroyed everything. "Do you miss it?" Asher asked. "Your old life?" "Parts of it. I miss my mother. I miss not being cold all the time," she smiled. "But no, I don't miss Philadelphia. Not really. That life was over before I left. This is my life now." "And you're content with that?" Zara looked at him across the firelight. His face was serious, searching hers for truth. "Yes," she said. "I am." January brought the worst cold yet. Temperatures plummeted so low that even inside with the fire blazing, Zara could see her breath. They wore layers of clothes and still shivered. Going outside to tend animals became an exercise in speed. Work as fast as possible, then get back to warmth before frostbite set in. One morning, Asher didn't come down for breakfast. Zara called up the stairs but got no answer. Worried, she climbed to his room and knocked. "Asher?" A groan answered her. She pushed the door open to find him in bed, face flushed with fever. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was weak. "Just need a minute." "You're sick." Zara felt his forehead burning hot. "When did this start?" "Last night. Thought it was just tired." He tried to sit up and failed. "The animals need—" "I'll handle the animals. You stay here." "Zara, you can't manage everything alone. Watch me." She spent the day working harder than she ever had. Feed the chickens, milk Ruth, distribute hay to the cattle, break ice on the water troughs, chop wood, haul water. By afternoon, her muscles screamed and her lungs burned from breathing freezing air, but the work was done. Inside, she made soup and brought it up to Asher. He was worse, shaking with chills despite the blankets piled on him. "You need to eat," she said. "Not hungry." "I don't care. You need strength to fight this." She sat on the edge of the bed and spooned soup into his mouth like he was a child. He was too weak to protest much. For 3 days, Asher stayed in bed, fever raging. Zara divided her time between caring for him and managing the ranch. She barely slept, catching an hour here and there in the chair by his bed. She changed the cool cloths on his forehead, forced water and broth into him, and prayed to whoever might be listening that he wouldn't die. On the 4th morning, his fever broke. Zara woke to find him watching her from the bed, his eyes clear for the first time in days. "You stayed," he said, his voice hoarse. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be?" "The animals are fine. I managed." She felt his forehead, still warm but not burning. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a horse." He tried to smile. "But better than yesterday." "You scared me." The admission came out before she could stop it. "I'm sorry." He reached for her hand. "Thank you. For taking care of everything. For taking care of me." "That's what partners do." "Partners?" he repeated softly. "Is that what we are?" Zara looked at their joined hands. "I think we've been partners for a while now. We just didn't say it out loud." "Say it now then, out loud." "We're partners," Zara said. "In the ranch, in this life, in whatever comes next." "Yeah," Asher said, "we are." He kept hold of her hand as he drifted back to sleep, and Zara sat there watching him breathe, feeling something in her chest that was equal parts terror and hope. She cared about this man, more than cared. Somewhere in the months of working beside him, learning from him, building a life with him, she'd developed feelings that went far beyond practical partnership. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt inevitable, like something that had been growing all along and she'd just finally noticed. By the end of January, Asher was back on his feet, though Zara insisted he take it easy for a few more days. He grumbled about it but complied, and Zara noticed he found excuses to be near her, helping with tasks she could manage alone, sitting in the kitchen while she cooked, finding reasons to touch her hand or shoulder in passing. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Asher said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About us. This arrangement." He looked at her directly. "When we got married, we said it was practical. Separate rooms, no expectations. But things have changed." Zara's heart beat faster. "Yes, they have. I don't want separate lives anymore." His voice was quiet but firm. "I want a real marriage. If you do. If that's something you'd want." "What does a real marriage mean to you?" "It means we're not just partners working the same land. It means we're building a life together, all parts of it. It means—" he struggled for words. It means I care about you, more than I expected to, more than I know how to say properly, and I want you to know that. Zara's throat tightened. I care about you too. I have for a while now. I was just afraid to say it. Why afraid? Because this started as desperation on both sides. I was afraid if I admitted I'd developed real feelings, you'd think I was trying to change the terms of our deal. Asher shook his head. The terms changed on their own. We changed them together just by living this life, by choosing each other every day. He reached for her hand. I'm not good with words, Zara, but I know what I feel. And I feel more for you than I've felt for anyone since my brother died. You brought this house back to life. You brought me back to life. Zara moved closer to him on the bench, their sides pressing together. I was so lost when I came here. I thought I was just surviving, making the best of a bad situation. But you gave me more than shelter. You gave me purpose. You treated me like an equal when everyone else saw me as a burden or worse. You were never a burden. I know that now. And I know that I love you. The words came out in a rush, terrifying and liberating at once. I don't know when it happened exactly. Somewhere between learning to milk cows and preserving vegetables and sitting with you in the evenings. But it did. I love you, Asher. He cupped her face in his rough hands, his gray eyes intense. I love you too. I think I have for months. I just didn't know how to say it. He kissed her then, gentle and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. His lips were warm against hers, and Zara felt months of careful distance dissolve in that kiss. This was what had been building between them all along, not just partnership or friendship, but something more fundamental. Love, hard-earned and real. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Asher rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he said. Not in a separate room. With me. Yes, Zara said without hesitation. That night, they broke down the last wall between them. Zara moved into Asher's room, into his bed, into his arms. They made love with a tenderness that surprised them both, all the loneliness and hunger of the past months pouring into their joining. It wasn't perfect or practiced. They were too new to each other for that. But it was real and honest and theirs. Afterward, Zara lay with her head on Asher's chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. No regrets? He asked quietly. None. You? Not a single one. He stroked her hair. This is what I wanted. I just didn't know how to ask for it. You don't have to ask anymore. I'm here. I'm yours. And I'm yours, Asher said, for as long as you'll have me. That might be a very long time. Good. He pulled her closer. I'm counting on it. February brought a brief thaw, temperatures rising just enough to turn snow to slush. Zara and Asher worked together with new ease, the physical intimacy translating into other aspects of their partnership. They moved around each other seamlessly now, communicating as much through touch and glances as through words. One afternoon, Daniel Garrett rode up with news. Asher, Mrs. Fletcher. He tipped his hat. Hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Asher said. What brings you out here? Wanted to let you know there's talk of building a schoolhouse in Hartwell. They're looking for contributions from the surrounding ranches, he grinned. Figured you might be interested, seeing as you're married now. Might have kids someday who'd need schooling. Zara felt heat rise to her face, but Asher just nodded. How much are they asking? Whatever people can spare. Some are giving money, some materials, some labor. We can contribute lumber, Asher said, and I can help with construction when the time comes. After Daniel left, Zara looked at Asher. Kids someday? Maybe. He met her eyes. Would you want that? Zara thought about it. A few months ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now, imagining children running around this ranch, growing up strong and capable like their father, it felt right. Yes, she said. Someday, when we're ready. We've got time. Asher pulled her close. No rush. Right now it's just us, and that's enough. But the seed had been planted, the future expanding in Zara's mind. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a life, a real life with possibility and hope. March arrived with the promise of spring. Snow began to melt in earnest, revealing dead grass that would soon turn green. The cattle grew restless, ready for open pasture. And Zara realized she'd been in Colorado for nearly a year. One evening, she stood on the porch, watching the sunset over the mountains, and Asher came to stand beside her. "Thinking about something?" he asked. "About how much has changed. A year ago, I was in Philadelphia, drowning in debt, desperate enough to marry a stranger. Now I'm here, and I can't imagine being anywhere else." "No regrets about the life you left behind?" "None." She leaned into him. "That wasn't life. That was just existing. This is life." Asher wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I'm glad you came here. Glad you took a chance on a gruff rancher with no social skills. You have social skills. You're just selective about using them." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Fair enough." They stood together as darkness fell, and Zara felt contentment settle over her like a blanket. She'd come west seeking escape and found something infinitely better: purpose, partnership, and love. The journey had been hard, the work brutal, the loneliness deep. But it had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this life. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Spring arrived slowly, grudgingly, as if winter didn't want to let go. The snow melted in patches, revealing muddy ground and the first brave shoots of grass. Zara worked in the garden, preparing soil that had been frozen solid for months, her hands remembering the rhythms she'd learned the previous year. This time, though, everything felt different. She wasn't working out of desperate necessity, but out of genuine investment in their future. Asher watched her from the fence one morning, his expression soft in a way it never would have been a year ago. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Nothing. Just thinking how natural you look doing that, like you've been a rancher's wife your whole life." "Hardly." Zara wiped dirt from her hands. "I still can't throw a hay bale worth a damn." "You're getting better." He climbed over the fence and came to her side. "The garden looks good. Better planned than last year." "I learned from my mistakes." She straightened, pressing a hand to her lower back. "Though I'm making new ones, apparently. I think I planted the beans too close together." "They'll be fine. Plants are forgiving." Asher pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Unlike Margaret Sutton, who I just saw in town and who still looks at me like I stole something that belonged to her. She never wanted me. She just wanted the moral superiority of helping me." "True enough." He released her reluctantly. "I need to ride out and check the north fence. Some of the posts looked weak when I was up there last week. Want to come?" "Can't. I promised myself I'd get these seeds in today. Besides, someone needs to start bread, or we'll be eating hardtack for dinner." "All right. I'll be back before dark." Zara watched him saddle his horse and ride out, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Love had snuck up on her, gentle and persistent, until it was as much a part of her life as breathing. She'd stopped questioning whether she deserved it or whether it was real. It simply was. By afternoon, the bread was rising, and Zara was scrubbing the kitchen floor when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Too fast. She looked out the window to see a horse she didn't recognize, ridden by a man in a suit that marked him as someone from town. Her stomach tightened with instinct she'd learned to trust. Unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. She opened the door before he could knock. "Mrs. Fletcher?" "Yes. Name's Harrison Webb. I'm an attorney from Denver." He held out papers. "I'm looking for Asher Fletcher. Is he available?" "He's checking fence lines. Won't be back until evening. What's this about?" Webb hesitated. "It's a legal matter. Perhaps I should wait and speak with him directly." "Mr. Webb, we're partners in everything on this ranch. Whatever you need to say to him, you can say to me." He studied her, then nodded. "Very well. I'm here regarding a property dispute. There's a claim that the eastern boundary of this ranch was incorrectly surveyed 20 years ago. The Henderson family, they own the adjacent property, are arguing that approximately 40 acres currently considered Fletcher land actually belongs to them." Zara felt ice form in her stomach. "That's ridiculous. Asher's father established those boundaries decades ago." "Yes, well, the Hendersons have recently had the land resurveyed. Their surveyor claims the original markers were placed incorrectly." Webb handed her the papers. "This is a formal notice of their intent to file a claim. Mr. Fletcher has 30 days to respond." 40 acres, Zara repeated. "That's a quarter of our best pasture land." "I understand this is concerning. I'd be happy to represent Mr. Fletcher's interests if he chooses to fight this claim. My fees are reasonable." I'm sure they are. Zara looked at the papers, the legal language swimming before her eyes. Thank you for delivering these, Mr. Webb. My husband will contact you if he decides he needs your services. After Webb left, Zara sat at the kitchen table, reading through the claim with growing anger. The Hendersons, she'd never met them, but Asher had mentioned them once or twice. They ran sheep, kept to themselves. Why were they doing this now, after all these years? When Asher returned just before sunset, one look at her face told him something was wrong. What happened? She handed him the papers. We have a problem. He read in silence, his expression darkening with each paragraph. When he finished, he set the papers down carefully, like they might explode. The Hendersons, he said flatly. Of course. You knew they might do this? I knew Frank Henderson has been struggling. Sheep prices are down, and he made some bad investments last year. I didn't think he'd resort to this. Asher ran a hand through his hair. 40 acres. That's the east pasture where we graze cattle all summer. Without it, we'd have to reduce our herd by a third. Can they actually win this claim? I don't know. The original survey was done by my father and old man Henderson together. They agreed on the boundaries. But if Frank got someone to resurvey and that person says it was wrong, he trailed off. Legal battles cost money we don't have. Even if we win, the lawyer fees could break us. Zara thought about the savings they'd carefully built over the year. It wasn't much, maybe enough to get through a bad season or pay for emergency medical care. A legal fight would consume it all and then some. We have to fight it, she said. That land is ours. Is it worth going broke over? Yes. Her voice was firm. Because if we let them take 40 acres now, what's next? Another neighbor decides our water rights are questionable? Someone claims the barn is on their property? You give ground once out here, people see you as weak. Asher looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. My father built this ranch from nothing. I'm not letting it get picked apart because Frank Henderson got greedy. So what do we do? First, we find the original survey documents. My father kept records of everything. They should be somewhere in the house. He stood. Then we go to town tomorrow and talk to people who remember the original boundary agreement. Get statements if we can. Build our case before we spend money on a lawyer. They spent the evening searching through boxes in the attic, coughing on dust and sorting through decades of accumulated papers. Zara found letters, old receipts, her father-in-law's journal entries. Finally, near midnight, Asher pulled out a leather folder. Here, he opened it carefully. Inside were hand-drawn maps, compass readings, and a document signed by both Thomas Fletcher and Frank Henderson's father, Martin. This is the original survey agreement, dated 1854. Both men signed it. Zara looked at the careful handwriting, the precise measurements. This should prove the boundaries were mutually agreed upon. Should, but Frank can argue his father was coerced or didn't understand the measurements, or that the physical markers have shifted over time. Asher's jaw was tight. He's gambling that I don't have the money or the will to fight back. He's gambling wrong. They rode to town the next morning, the survey documents carefully wrapped in oilcloth. Sheriff Garrett listened to their story with a grim expression. I heard about this, he said. Frank's been talking around town, trying to drum up support for his claim. Says he's just correcting a historical injustice. It's theft dressed up in legal language, Asher said. My father and Martin Henderson were friends. They agreed on those boundaries fair and square. You got proof of that? Asher showed him the documents. Garrett studied them carefully, then nodded. This is solid, but you're still going to need a lawyer. Frank hired one from Denver. Expensive fellow from what I hear. He's not playing around. We can't afford a Denver lawyer. Then you need someone local who knows the history here, someone the judge will listen to. Garrett thought for a moment. Talk to Samuel Brennan. He's Thomas's younger brother. Came out here last year. He's practicing law now, has an office above the Mercantile. The name hit Zara like a fist. Thomas Brennan, the man she'd been supposed to marry. The man whose death had set all of this in motion. She'd almost forgotten about him in the months since arriving. Now his brother was here, practicing law in the same town. Asher caught her expression. You don't have to come with me. No, I want to. She squared her shoulders. Let's go talk to Samuel Brennan. The law office was small but neat, with books lining the walls and a desk covered in papers. The man who stood when they entered was younger than Thomas would have been, maybe 28, with light brown hair and a serious expression. Mr. Fletcher, Mrs. Fletcher. His eyes lingered on Zara. I've been expecting you might come by. You heard about the Henderson claim, Asher said. Word travels fast in small towns. Samuel gestured to chairs. Please sit. I'd like to help if I can. They explained the situation, showing him the survey documents. Samuel examined them with the careful attention of someone who knew what he was looking at. This is excellent documentation, he said finally. Clear, signed by both parties, with witness signatures. The question is whether a judge will accept it over a new survey. What do you think our chances are? Zara asked. Samuel looked at her directly for the first time. Honestly? Good, if we present this right. The law favors established boundaries that have been honored for decades. The Hendersons would need to prove not just that the original survey was wrong, but that your family knew it was wrong and benefited from it anyway. That's a high bar. But Frank Henderson has a Denver lawyer, Asher said. We can't match that kind of firepower. You don't need to. You need someone who knows local law and local judges. Samuel leaned back. I'll be direct with you. I'm new to this area and I need to build my practice. I'll take your case for a reduced fee, paid only if we win. If we lose, you pay my expenses, but nothing more. Why would you do that? Asher asked. Samuel glanced at Zara again, then away. Because I know something about the Fletcher family that others might not. My brother Thomas spoke highly of you in his letters, Mr. Fletcher. You helped him when he first arrived, taught him about ranching. He considered you a friend. He paused. And because I believe in justice, not legal theft. The unspoken truth hung in the air, that Zara had been meant to marry his brother, that circumstances had led her to Asher instead. But Samuel's expression held no resentment, only professional courtesy. We accept, Asher said. Thank you. They shook hands, and Samuel promised to file a response to the claim within the week. As they left, he called after them. Mrs. Fletcher, a word? Zara turned back. Asher gave her a questioning look, but she nodded for him to go ahead. Samuel waited until Asher was out of earshot. I wanted to say, Thomas would have been glad to know you found happiness. He wrote about wanting to build a good life here, about hoping to find a partner who could share that dream. It seems you did that, just with a different man. I'm sorry about your brother, Zara said quietly. I never knew him, but his letters were kind. He was kind. Too kind sometimes. This frontier needed harder men than him. Samuel smiled sadly. But you seem to have found the right match. Asher Fletcher has a reputation as a good man. Fair, honest, loyal. You could have done worse. I know. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Samuel, please, we're going to be working together. Might as well be on first-name terms. Outside, Asher was waiting by the wagon. Everything all right? Fine. He just wanted to express condolences about his brother. Zara climbed onto the wagon seat. I think we can trust him. I think so too. Asher snapped the reins, though it's going to be strange having Thomas's brother represent us. Everything about my connection to the Brennan family is strange, Zara said, but we work with what we have. Over the following weeks, Samuel threw himself into building their case. He interviewed old-timers who remembered the original survey, gathered documents from the county records, and found inconsistencies in the Hendersons' new survey. Zara and Asher kept working the ranch, trying to maintain normalcy even as legal pressure mounted. One evening, Frank Henderson himself rode up to the house. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with a weathered face and calculating eyes. Fletcher, he said without preamble, I'd like to talk. Asher stepped onto the porch, positioning himself between Henderson and the door where Zara stood listening. Nothing to talk about until the judge makes his ruling. Don't be stubborn. I'm offering you a deal. You give up 20 acres instead of 40, and we call it settled. No court, no legal fees, no hard feelings. The answer is no. You're making a mistake. That lawyer you hired, Samuel Brennan, he's green, barely out of school. My attorney will eat him alive. Then I guess we'll see what happens in court. Henderson's expression hardened. You think you're better than me, Fletcher? You think because your father stole that land first, that makes it yours? My father stole nothing. He and your father agreed on those boundaries. My father was a fool who let himself be cheated. I'm not making the same mistake. Henderson turned his horse. Last chance, Fletcher. Take the deal or lose everything in court. Get off my property. After Henderson left, Zara came outside. He's scared. That's why he's offering a deal. Maybe. Or maybe he knows something we don't. Asher sat heavily on the porch steps. What if we lose, Zara? What if we spend everything on legal fees and lose anyway? Then we lose, but we fight first. She sat beside him. We didn't build this life by giving up when things got hard. We're not starting now. He took her hand. You're tougher than I am. No, I'm just too stubborn to know when I'm beat. The court date was set for late April. As it approached, Zara threw herself into work with almost manic energy, trying to keep her mind off the looming battle. She expanded the garden, planted more vegetables than they could possibly eat, cleaned and organized every corner of the house. Asher worked just as hard, repairing fences and buildings that didn't need repair, keeping his hands busy because his mind wouldn't settle. They made love with desperate intensity at night, clinging to each other like the world might end at dawn. 3 days before the hearing, Samuel came to the ranch with news. I found something, he said, spreading papers on their kitchen table. The surveyor Henderson hired, a man named Cyrus Todd, has a history. He's been sued twice for fraudulent surveys, both times in land disputes where he was paid by one party to produce favorable results. Can we use that? Asher asked. Absolutely. It goes to credibility. If we can show Todd has a pattern of producing surveys that benefit whoever pays him most, it undermines the Hendersons' entire case. Samuel looked energized, younger than his years. We might actually win this. The hearing took place in the courthouse in Hartwell, a simple building that served multiple functions. The judge was a severe-looking man named Whitmore, who'd been presiding over frontier disputes for 20 years. Zara sat behind Asher, watching as Henderson's expensive Denver lawyer, a man named Carlisle, who wore suits that cost more than most ranchers made in a year, presented their case. He was smooth, confident, painting the Fletchers as opportunists who'd taken advantage of a poor survey to steal valuable land. Then Samuel stood up, and Zara saw why Thomas had been proud of his brother. He wasn't smooth like Carlisle, but he was precise, methodical, building his argument brick by brick. He presented the original survey documents, called witnesses who testified to the long-standing boundary agreement, and then delivered the killing blow, documentation of Cyrus Todd's fraudulent history. Carlisle tried to recover, objecting and arguing, but Judge Whitmore shut him down. I've seen enough, the judge said. The original survey was conducted by mutual agreement between Thomas Fletcher and Martin Henderson with clear documentation and witness signatures. It's been honored for over 20 years. The Henderson claim rests entirely on a new survey conducted by a man with a documented history of fraud. He looked at Frank Henderson. I'm ruling in favor of the Fletcher family. The existing boundaries stand. The relief that flooded through Zara was so intense it left her dizzy. Asher turned to her, his eyes bright, and she saw her own joy reflected there. They'd won. They'd fought and won. Outside the courthouse, Samuel shook Asher's hand. Congratulations. You've got yourself a good attorney. The best. Asher clapped him on the shoulder. What do we owe you? We agreed on a fee. I'll send you a bill. Samuel smiled. But it won't be much. This case was its own reward. Word will spread about what happened here. Should help my practice considerably. Thank you, Zara said, for everything. You're welcome. Samuel tipped his hat. Build a good life on that land. Make it count. They rode home in the wagon, Zara pressed against Asher's side, both of them grinning like fools. We did it, she said. You did it. You're the one who said we had to fight. We did it together. She kissed his cheek. Like we do everything. That night, they celebrated with a bottle of whiskey Asher had been saving for a special occasion. They sat on the porch, passing the bottle back and forth, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. I was scared, Asher admitted. Really scared. Not just of losing the land, but of letting you down, of proving I couldn't protect what was ours. You didn't let me down. You never have. Zara took his hand. You gave me a life when I had nothing. You treated me with respect when others saw me as worthless. You loved me when I didn't think I deserved to be loved. You could never let me down, Asher. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You took a chance on a desperate woman with nothing to offer but hard work. You had everything to offer. I just had to be smart enough to see it. He kissed her deeply, tasting whiskey and triumph and love. Come to bed." They made love that night with joy instead of desperation, celebrating not just the court victory, but the life they'd built together. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets with Asher's arm around her, Zara thought about how far she'd come from that terrified woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach a year ago. She'd been so lost then, so certain she was making the worst mistake of her life. Instead, she'd found the best thing that ever happened to her. Spring deepened into early summer. The garden flourished under Zara's careful tending. The cattle grew fat on good pasture, and Zara started noticing changes in herself. A tenderness in her breasts, mornings where the smell of coffee made her queasy, exhaustion that even rest couldn't quite cure. She suspected what it meant but said nothing, waiting to be certain. By mid-May, she was sure. She was pregnant. The realization brought a complicated mix of emotions. Joy, certainly. She and Asher had talked about children, wanted them eventually, but also fear. She'd seen what childbirth could do, knew the risks. Out here, miles from town, with only Asher to help if something went wrong, she'd be gambling with her life. She kept the secret for a week, trying to decide how to tell him. Finally, one evening as they sat on the porch, she couldn't hold it in anymore. "Asher, I need to tell you something." He looked at her, immediately alert to her serious tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think so." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it. "Pregnant. You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it. But yes, I'm sure." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby. We're having a baby." "You're happy?" Zara asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy?" He pulled back to look at her. "Zara, I'm terrified and thrilled and so full of feeling I don't have words for it. Yes, I'm happy." "Are you?" "Yes, and also scared out of my mind." "Me too." He put his hand on her stomach, where nothing showed yet, but where everything was changing. "But we'll face it together, like we face everything." They told no one for the first few months, keeping the secret between them. Zara continued working, though Asher started hovering, trying to keep her from lifting anything heavy or working too hard. She tolerated it because she knew it came from love, even when it drove her crazy. By July, she was showing enough that hiding it became impossible. They rode to town, and Zara made an appointment with the doctor, an older man named Harrison who delivered half the babies in the county. "You're healthy," he told her after an examination. "Baby seems to be growing well. I'd estimate you're due in late November, early December." "And the risks?" Zara asked. "Same as they always are. Childbirth is dangerous, especially out here. But you're young and strong. You've got a good chance." He looked at her seriously. "When your time comes, you need to get to town. Don't try to deliver at the ranch." "We will," Asher promised. News spread through Hartwell faster than wildfire. By the time they left the doctor's office, half the town seemed to know. Margaret Sutton stopped them on the street. "I heard," she said, her expression unreadable. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Zara said carefully. "You've done well for yourself, I'll give you that. Better than I expected." Margaret's tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. "If you need help when the time comes, send word. I've birthed 4 children and helped with a dozen more. I know what I'm doing." It was the closest thing to kindness Margaret had ever shown her. Zara nodded, surprised. "I appreciate that." Summer passed in a haze of heat and preparation. Zara sewed baby clothes from scraps of cloth, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind wandered to the future. Asher built a cradle in the barn, working on it during the evenings, his rough hands creating something beautiful and delicate. One night, as Zara lay in bed, she felt the baby move for the first time. A flutter like butterfly wings inside her. She gasped, pressing her hand to her stomach. "What is it?" Asher asked, immediately alert. The baby moved. "Here, feel." He put his hand where hers had been, waiting. After a moment, the flutter came again, and his face lit up with wonder. "That's our child," he said softly. "That's our baby." "Yes." Zara covered his hand with hers. "Are we ready for this?" "No." He smiled. "But we'll figure it out. We always do." August brought a visitor neither of them expected. Helen Winters, the woman from Philadelphia who'd questioned Zara's choices the previous winter. She arrived in a hired carriage, looking out of place in her expensive traveling clothes. "Zara," she said, stepping down from the carriage, "I heard through mutual acquaintances that you were, that you were with child. I wanted to see how you were managing." "I'm managing fine." Zara stood on the porch, one hand protectively on her swollen belly. "Are you?" Helen looked around at the ranch, the mountains, the isolation. "You're so far from civilization. What if something goes wrong?" "Then we'll handle it." Zara's voice was firm. "Helen, I appreciate your concern, but this is my life now. I chose it. I'm happy here." "Are you really? Or have you just convinced yourself you are because you have no other choice?" Before Zara could answer, Asher came around the corner of the house, wiping his hands on his work pants. He took in the scene immediately. Zara tense, the strange woman in fancy clothes, the hired carriage. "Everything all right?" he asked, moving to stand beside Zara. "Fine." Helen was just leaving, but Helen wasn't done. She looked at Asher, then at Zara. "I came to offer you a way out. My husband has connections in Denver. We could arrange employment for you, a safe place to have your baby, proper medical care. You wouldn't have to stay in this wilderness." "This wilderness is my home," Zara said. "This man is my husband. This baby is ours together. I don't need rescuing, Helen. I never did. You're making a mistake, maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Zara softened slightly. "I know you mean well, but I'm not that desperate girl from Philadelphia anymore. I'm someone different now, someone stronger, and I like who I've become." Helen studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "I can see that. You do look different, happier, maybe, despite everything." She climbed back into the carriage. "If you ever change your mind, the offer stands." After she left, Asher pulled Zara close. "You handled that well. I'm tired of people thinking I need saving." She leaned into him. "I saved myself. With your help, but mostly myself." "Yes," he said. "You did." September brought cooler weather and the hard work of preparing for winter again. But this time, they'd be preparing for a baby too. The enormity of it hit Zara at odd moments. She was going to be a mother. She was going to bring a new life into this harsh, beautiful world. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she asked Asher what had been on her mind for weeks. "What if I'm not good at this? Being a mother?" "What if I'm not good at being a father?" he countered. "We'll figure it out together, same as we figured out everything else." "It's different. A baby is—" She struggled for words. "A baby is permanent. We can't just decide it's not working and move on." "No, we can't." He took her hand. "But Zara, look at what we've already done. We built a marriage out of desperation and turned it into love. We saved this ranch. We fought off legal threats. We survived a winter that would have broken most people. If we can do all that, we can raise a child. You make it sound easy? It won't be, but nothing worthwhile ever is." He kissed her forehead. "We've got this. I believe in us." His confidence steadied her. She'd learned to trust Asher's judgment over the months they'd been together. If he believed they could do this, maybe they could. October arrived with the first snow flurries, and Zara's belly grew large enough that simple tasks became difficult. Asher took over more of the work, insisting she rest. She tried to argue, but exhaustion won out. Growing a human was harder than any ranch work she'd ever done. One afternoon, as she was folding baby clothes, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, gripping the table. "Zara?" Asher was across the room in an instant. "What's wrong?" "Pain. Just a pain." She breathed through it. "It's passing," but his face was white. "We should get you to town, to the doctor." "It's too early. I'm not due for another 6 weeks." But even as she said it, another pain hit, stronger this time. "I don't care. We're going to town, now." He helped her to the wagon, wrapped her in blankets, and drove faster than was safe on the rough roads. By the time they reached Hartwell, the pains were coming regularly. Dr. Harrison examined her and shook his head. "Baby's coming early. Not dangerously early, but definitely early. We need to get you settled." They put Zara in a room above the doctor's office, a simple space with a bed and clean linens. Margaret Sutton arrived, as promised, bringing supplies and experience. First babies take their time, she told Zara. Could be hours. Could be a full day. Try to rest between pains. But Zara couldn't rest. Fear and anticipation kept her awake, aware of every sensation in her body. Asher sat beside her, holding her hand, looking more terrified than she'd ever seen him. You should go, she told him during a lull. Men don't usually. I'm not going anywhere. His grip on her hand tightened. We do this together. Night fell, and the pains intensified. Zara cried out despite trying to stay quiet, and Asher looked like each sound was a knife to his heart. Margaret worked efficiently, checking Zara's progress, offering water and encouragement. You're doing well, she said. Baby's coming, but safely. Everything is as it should be. Somewhere around midnight, exhaustion and pain blurred together. Zara lost track of time, aware only of the relentless contractions and Asher's voice in her ear, telling her she was strong. She could do this. He loved her. And then, in the early hours before dawn, with one final push that felt like it might split her in two, their daughter was born. The baby's cry filled the room, loud, indignant, alive. Margaret cleaned her quickly and placed her in Zara's arms, and Zara looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature who was somehow hers. A girl, she whispered. Asher, we have a daughter. He leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face without shame. She's perfect. You're perfect. I love you both so much. The baby, still unnamed, still brand new to the world, gripped Zara's finger with surprising strength. And Zara felt something shift inside her, a fierce protective love that made everything she'd felt before seem small in comparison. This was her daughter. This was her family. This was her life, hard-won and precious and entirely her own. They named her Claire after Asher's mother. She was small, barely 6 pounds, with dark hair that stuck up in wild tufts and eyes that would eventually settle into gray like her father's. She was also, as Zara discovered within the first week, the most demanding creature ever to enter her life. Claire cried constantly, hungry, wet, uncomfortable, or simply because the world was too big and strange. Zara walked the floor at all hours, bouncing the baby, singing songs she barely remembered, doing anything to stop the wailing that seemed to echo through the small room above the doctor's office where they were staying until Zara recovered enough to travel. She's healthy, Dr. Harrison assured them on the 3rd day. Some babies are just fussy. She'll settle down eventually. Eventually felt like a lifetime away. Zara sat in the rocking chair, nursing Claire for what felt like the 100th time that day, so exhausted she could barely keep her eyes open. Asher hovered nearby, looking helpless in a way he never had facing down cattle rustlers or legal battles. What can I do? He asked. I don't know. Zara's voice cracked. I'm doing everything the book said to do, and she won't stop crying. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. You are. You're just tired. He knelt beside the chair. Let me take her for a while. You need to sleep. She needs to eat. She just ate. I'll walk with her. If she gets hungry again, I'll wake you. He carefully lifted Claire from Zara's arms. The baby immediately started fussing, but Asher held her against his chest, swaying gently. Go, sleep. That's an order. Zara was too tired to argue. She collapsed on the bed and was asleep within seconds. When she woke, late afternoon sun was slanting through the window. She sat up in panic. How long had she slept? Where was Claire? Then she heard voices from the main room and crept to the door. Asher sat in the rocking chair, Claire nestled in his arms, finally quiet. Margaret Sutton was there too, showing him how to support the baby's head properly. Like this, Margaret said. Firm, but gentle. Babies can sense when you're nervous. I'm terrified I'll break her, Asher admitted. You won't. She's tougher than she looks. Margaret glanced toward the bedroom door and saw Zara watching. There you are, feeling better? Yes, thank you. Zara came into the room, looking at her husband and daughter. How long was I asleep? 4 hours, Asher said. Claire had a bottle. Margaret showed me how to prepare it, and she's been content since. Just needed her father for a while, Margaret said. Babies know the difference between anxious mothers and calm fathers sometimes. She stood to leave. You're doing fine, Zara. Better than most new mothers. Don't be so hard on yourself. After Margaret left, Zara sat beside Asher, looking at Claire's sleeping face. I feel like I'm failing already. You're not failing, you're learning. We both are. He shifted Claire to one arm and pulled Zara close with the other. This is harder than anything we've done, but we'll figure it out, just like everything else. They went home a week later, the wagon moving slowly over the rough roads to avoid jostling the baby. Claire slept most of the way, wrapped in blankets against the November cold. When they arrived at the ranch, Zara felt emotion swell in her chest. Home. She was bringing her daughter home. The house looked the same, but felt different now. The cradle Asher had built sat beside their bed, waiting. The baby clothes Zara had sewn were folded neatly in the dresser. Everything was ready, or as ready as they could make it. That first night home, Zara woke every 2 hours to feed Claire, stumbling through the darkness in a haze of exhaustion. By the third night, she was so tired she started crying while nursing, unable to stop the tears that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Asher found her like that, sitting in the rocking chair with Claire at her breast, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? His voice was alarmed. I don't know, nothing. Everything. Zara wiped her eyes with her free hand. I'm just so tired and she needs so much, and I feel like I'm disappearing into this, and I love her so much it terrifies me, and I don't know what I'm doing. Breathe. Asher knelt in front of her. Zara, breathe. She tried, gulping air. Claire, oblivious, kept nursing contentedly. Listen to me, Asher said. You're doing everything right. Claire is healthy and fed and loved, but you need to take care of yourself too. Tomorrow, I'm handling the morning feeding. You're sleeping until you wake up naturally, even if that's noon. And I'm hiring someone from town to help a few days a week. We can't afford that. We can and we will. This isn't negotiable. His tone was firm. I won't watch you break yourself trying to do everything alone. That's not what partnership means. The next morning, true to his word, Asher took Claire downstairs at dawn. Zara woke 3 hours later, panicked, and rushed down to find him at the kitchen table, feeding the baby a bottle, while simultaneously reading a book on cattle breeding. She's fine, he said before Zara could ask. Ate well, had a clean diaper, and has been watching me read for the past 20 minutes. Claire's eyes were indeed fixed on her father's face, tracking his movements with the intense focus only babies could manage. Zara felt her panic ease. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. She is my daughter too. I should be doing more. He looked up from the book. I talked to Margaret. She knows a young woman named Anna who just moved to Hartwell with her mother. She's looking for work and has experience with babies. Margaret's bringing her by tomorrow. Anna turned out to be a godsend, a quiet girl of 17 with capable hands and a calm demeanor that soothed even Claire's worst fussing. She came 3 mornings a week, handling laundry and basic housework while Zara rested or caught up on sleep. The difference was immediate. With help, Zara could breathe again. Winter settled in properly, and their lives found a new rhythm. Asher handled the outdoor work and the early morning feeding. Zara managed the house and most of Claire's care, with Anna's help. They took turns with night wakings, though Zara still did most of them since she was nursing. By December, Claire had grown chubby and alert, her eyes focusing on faces, her mouth forming sounds that weren't quite words but suggested she was trying. Zara discovered that motherhood, while exhausting, also brought moments of piercing joy. Claire's first smile, the weight of her sleeping in Zara's arms, the way Asher's entire face transformed when he looked at his daughter. Christmas came, and this year they celebrated properly. Asher cut a larger tree and Zara made decorations with Claire watching from her cradle. They had no gifts to exchange, but it didn't matter. They had each other and their daughter, and that was enough. On Christmas evening, as they sat by the fire with Claire asleep between them, Asher said, Do you remember last Christmas? How different everything was? We'd just admitted we had real feelings for each other, Zara said. We were still figuring out what that meant. And now we have a baby. He shook his head in wonder. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life, that you're my wife, that she's my daughter. 2 years ago, I was alone in this house, convinced I'd die alone too. 2 years ago, I was drowning in debt in Philadelphia, convinced I'd end up in a workhouse or worse. Zara leaned against him. We saved each other, I think. No. We built something together. There's a difference. He kissed the top of her head. I love you, both of you, more than I knew I could love anyone. I love you too. Zara looked down at Claire, so small and perfect in theirs. Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate woman with nothing to offer. You had everything to offer. I was just smart enough to see it. January brought bitter cold and snow that piled against the house in drifts taller than Asher. They were trapped inside for days at a time, but the isolation didn't feel oppressive anymore. They had their small family, their warm house, enough food put up to last the winter. They had everything that mattered. Claire grew rapidly, her personality emerging. She was stubborn like Zara, determined like Asher, and absolutely fearless. She grabbed at everything, put everything in her mouth, and screamed her displeasure when prevented from doing exactly what she wanted. She's going to be a handful, Asher said one evening, rescuing a book from Claire's drool-covered grip. She already is. But Zara said it with affection. Claire's fierce independence reminded her of herself, of the strength she'd had to develop to survive. By February, Zara was restless. She loved Claire desperately, but the constant confinement to the house was wearing on her. She missed working outside, missed feeling competent and capable, instead of perpetually covered in spit-up and exhausted. I want to help with the ranch work again, she told Asher one morning. You are helping. You're raising our daughter. I know, but I miss the other work too. I miss feeling like myself. She saw his expression and added quickly, not that I don't love being Claire's mother. I do. But I'm also more than that. Asher was quiet for a moment. What if we expanded Anna's hours? She could watch Claire a few mornings a week while you worked outside, if that's what you want. You wouldn't mind? Mind? Zara, I fell in love with the woman who could throw hay bales and fix fences and stand up to legal threats. I don't want you to lose that person just because you're a mother now. You can be both. The relief was enormous. Thank you for understanding. I'm trying to. He pulled her close. I know this is harder for you than for me. Your whole body changed. You're the one doing most of the care. I'm just trying to support you however I can. So they adjusted again. Anna came 5 mornings a week now, and Zara spent those mornings working outside, mucking stalls, repairing tack, checking on the cattle. The physical work felt like medicine, reconnecting her to the capable woman she'd become. She was still Claire's mother, still Asher's wife, but she was also herself again. March brought the first hints of thaw and a letter from Samuel Brennan. He'd been offered a position with a law firm in Denver, a significant step up from his small Hartwell practice. He wants to know if we'd give him a reference, Asher said, reading the letter. Says our case helped establish his reputation. Of course we will. He saved the ranch. Zara was nursing Claire, who was getting big enough to grab at her mother's hair while eating. He's a good man. He deserves success. Asher wrote a glowing reference, and 2 weeks later they received another letter thanking them and announcing Samuel's departure from Hartwell. There was a postscript that made Zara smile. He says he's grateful the ranch stayed in good hands, that Thomas would have been pleased, she read aloud. He wishes us all happiness. That's generous of him, Asher said. Not every man could be so gracious about his brother's intended marrying someone else. He understood that I never belonged to Thomas. We'd never met. I was just a desperate woman answering an advertisement. Zara looked at Claire, now 6 months old and grabbing at everything within reach. This is where I was supposed to end up. With you. With her. This is my real life. Spring arrived in earnest, and with it came new challenges. Claire was mobile now, crawling everywhere and pulling herself up on furniture. Keeping her safe while also managing ranch work required constant vigilance. One afternoon in April, Zara was in the garden planting seeds while Claire played nearby on a blanket. She turned away for just a moment, and when she looked back, Claire was gone. Panic seized her. Claire! She heard giggling from behind the chicken coop. She ran around it to find Claire sitting in the dirt, covered in mud, eating something she'd found on the ground. No! Zara swept her up, digging the dirt out of the baby's mouth. Claire immediately started wailing, outraged at having her treasure stolen. You can't eat dirt, sweetheart. I know it's disappointing, but dirt is not food. Asher came running at the sound of crying. What happened? She found dirt. Apparently it's delicious. Zara held the muddy, screaming baby away from her clean dress. I turned away for 5 seconds. That's all it takes. He took Claire, who continued shrieking. Let's get you cleaned up, you little mud monster. That night, After Claire was finally asleep, Zara said, "I was terrified when I couldn't see her, just for those few seconds before I found her. My heart stopped. Mine too, when I heard you shout." Asher pulled her close. "That's parenthood, I guess. Constant terror that something will happen to them. How do people survive this? This much fear? By loving them anyway, by accepting that fear is the price of love." He was quiet for a moment. "My mother told me once, before she died, that having children means your heart walks around outside your body for the rest of your life. I didn't understand then. I do now." Summer brought its own rhythm. Claire grew into a sturdy baby who laughed easily and explored everything. She loved the animals, squealing with delight at the chickens and trying to grab the cats' tails. She loved being outside, loved the garden, loved watching her father work. Zara had never imagined herself as a mother, but she'd never imagined herself as a rancher's wife either. She was learning that life rarely matched imagination. It was messier, harder, but also richer than anything she'd planned. One evening in July, as Zara was putting Claire to bed, she sang a song her own mother had sung to her. The melody was old, the words half forgotten, but she remembered enough. Claire's eyes drooped, fighting sleep, until finally they closed. Zara stood there looking down at her daughter, feeling the weight of love and responsibility and hope. This tiny person depended on her completely. It was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. "You asleep?" Asher whispered from the doorway. "She is." Zara carefully backed away from the cradle. "I was just thinking about my mother, wishing she could have met Claire. What would she have thought of all this? You, here, married to a rancher? I think she would have been proud." Zara moved into his arms. "She wanted me to be happy and safe. I'm both. More than I ever thought I'd be." They walked downstairs together, the house quiet around them. Outside, the summer night was warm, crickets singing in the grass. They sat on the porch, as they had so many evenings, watching the stars emerge. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Thomas Brennan hadn't died?" Asher asked suddenly. "If you'd married him like you planned?" "Sometimes. I think I would have been content, maybe. He seemed kind in his letters, but I wouldn't have had this. You, Claire, this life we built together." She looked at him. "Everything that's happened, even the hard parts, led me here. I can't regret any of it. Not even the desperate parts, the fear and uncertainty. Not even those. They made me who I am. They made us who we are." Zara took his hand. "I wouldn't change anything." August brought visitors, Daniel Garrett and his new wife, a pretty blonde woman named Sarah, who'd moved from Denver. They came for dinner, and Sarah was immediately enchanted with Claire. "She's beautiful," Sarah said, holding the baby with practiced ease. "You're so lucky." "We are," Zara agreed. She'd learned to accept compliments about Claire without the defensive instinct that said she didn't deserve good things. Over dinner, Daniel told them about changes in Hartwell. The schoolhouse was nearly finished. 2 new families had settled nearby. The town was growing, slowly but steadily. "It's becoming civilized," he said with a grin. "Give it another 10 years and we might even have a real library." "Don't hold your breath," Asher said. "But it's good to see growth. Good for everyone." After they left, Zara cleaned up while Asher put Claire to bed. She was washing dishes when she felt his arms come around her from behind. "Tired?" he asked. "Always. But it's a good tired." She leaned back against him. "I like Daniel and Sarah. It's nice having friends." "Yeah, it is, He kissed her neck. "Come to bed. Dishes can wait." They made love that night with the easy familiarity of people who knew each other's bodies intimately, who'd learned what pleased and what comforted. Afterward, Zara lay with her head on Asher's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling profoundly content. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He stroked her hair. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing this. For choosing me. For building this life with me." His voice was quiet in the darkness. "I know it wasn't your first choice. I know you came here out of desperation, but you stayed because you wanted to. That means everything. You gave me a choice when I had none. You gave me respect when I had nothing. You loved me when I didn't know I was worth loving." Zara propped herself up to look at him. "I chose you, Asher. Every day, I choose you. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." He pulled her down for a kiss that said more than words could. September arrived with cooling temperatures and the work of harvest. Claire was nearly a year old now, walking unsteadily and babbling constantly in a language only she understood. She helped with everything, which meant she got underfoot and made every task take twice as long, but neither Zara nor Asher had the heart to discourage her enthusiasm. One afternoon, Zara was in the garden harvesting vegetables when Margaret Sutton rode up. They'd developed an unexpected friendship over the months, built on mutual respect, if not warmth. "Zara," Margaret said by way of greeting, "I brought something for Claire." She handed over a small cloth doll, hand-sewn with careful stitches. "Margaret, this is beautiful. Thank you. I made it from scraps, nothing fancy." But her eyes softened when Claire grabbed the doll and immediately tried to eat it. "She's grown so much." "She has. Every day she's different." Zara rescued the doll from Claire's mouth. "Would you like to stay for coffee?" They sat on the porch while Claire played at their feet, and Margaret said something Zara had never expected. "I was wrong about you. When you first arrived, I thought you were weak, city-soft. I didn't think you'd last a month out here, much less thrive." "I didn't think I'd last either," Zara admitted. "But you did. More than that. You became one of us. Not many people can do that." Margaret sipped her coffee. "I admire that. And I'm sorry I was so hard on you in the beginning. You gave me a place to stay when I had nowhere else to go. I've never forgotten that. I used you as cheap labor. You also showed me what ranch work was. Without that experience, I wouldn't have known if I could handle this life." Zara smiled. "So, thank you, even if that wasn't your intention." Margaret left an hour later, and Zara felt like something had shifted. She'd finally earned acceptance from one of the hardest women in the territory. It mattered more than she'd expected. October brought Claire's first birthday. They had a small celebration, just the three of them, plus Anna and her mother. Zara made a cake that didn't rise properly, and Claire smashed her slice all over her face, delighted by the mess. "Happy birthday, sweet girl," Zara said, wiping frosting from Claire's hair. Claire grinned, showing off new teeth, and said something that sounded remarkably like "Mama." Zara's breath caught. Did she just... "She did." Asher was grinning. "Say it again, Claire. Mama." "Mama!" Claire shouted, then laughed at their reactions. It was the first clear word, and it opened the floodgates. Within days, Claire was attempting new words constantly. Dada, cat, no, her favorite, more. Her personality emerged fully now, stubborn and sweet and absolutely fearless. Winter came again, their second full winter as a family. This time Zara wasn't afraid. They were prepared, experienced, confident in their ability to survive whatever the season brought. One snowy evening in December, as they sat by the fire with Claire asleep upstairs, Asher said, "I've been thinking about expanding the ranch, maybe adding more cattle, building a second barn. If we're careful, we could grow this into something substantial." "You want to build an empire?" Zara teased. "Not an empire, just security. Something to pass on to Claire someday. Something she can be proud of." He looked at Zara. "What do you think?" "I think it's a good idea. We've proven we can handle the work." She was quiet for a moment. "I never thought I'd care about land and cattle and building something lasting, but I do. I want this ranch to thrive. I want Claire to grow up knowing her parents built something real. Then we'll do it, together." They spent the winter planning, sketching designs for the new barn, calculating how many head of cattle they could support, discussing the future with the kind of optimism that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Spring returned, and with it came Helen Winters one last time. She arrived unannounced, as before, but this time her expression held no pity. "Zara," she said, "I came to apologize." "For what?" "For being condescending. For assuming you were making a mistake. For thinking you needed rescuing." Helen looked around at the ranch, at Zara in her work clothes with flour on her hands and contentment on her face. "You didn't need rescuing. You needed a chance, and you took it and built something remarkable." "Thank you for saying that. I also came to say goodbye. My husband's business in Denver is finished. We're going back to Philadelphia. But I wanted to see you one more time to tell you I was wrong." She smiled. "You found something I never did, Real partnership, real purpose. I'm happy for you. After Helen left, Zara stood in the yard, watching the dust settle from her carriage. 2 years ago, Helen's opinions had mattered enormously. Now, they were just words from someone who lived a different kind of life. Zara had her own life now, her own identity, her own purpose. She went inside to find Asher giving Claire lunch, the baby chattering away about something only she understood. He looked up when Zara entered, and his smile was all the affirmation she needed. This was her life. Not perfect, not easy, but absolutely hers. Summer brought growth and change. They built a new barn, hired a young man named Peter to help with the increased work, and added 20 head of cattle to their herd. The ranch was thriving, and so were they. One evening in July, as Zara put Claire to bed, the little girl said, "Love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweet girl, so much." "Sing?" Zara sang the old song, the one her mother had sung to her, and felt the circle complete. She was passing on something precious, creating memories that Claire would carry forward. Downstairs, Asher was working on the accounts. Zara sat beside him, looking over the numbers. "We're doing well," she said. "Better than well. We're actually making a profit." "We are." He set down his pencil. "I couldn't have done this without you. We did it together. That's the point." She took his hand. "Do you remember when we got married? How awkward and uncertain everything was. I remember thinking I'd made the most impulsive decision of my life. And now? Now I know it was the best decision of my life." He pulled her onto his lap. "You made me believe in partnership again, in love, in the possibility of happiness. You gave me a life when I had none. You showed me I was stronger than I knew." Zara kissed him softly. "We saved each other. No, we built each other. There's a difference." Claire called from upstairs, not upset, just wanting attention. They went up together, finding her standing in her crib, grinning at them. "Not sleepy?" Asher asked. "Not sleepy," Claire agreed cheerfully. They brought her downstairs and sat on the porch, Claire between them, watching the summer sunset. The mountains glowed pink and gold in the fading light. The air smelled like grass and pine and home. "This is everything," Zara said quietly. "This moment, this life. Everything I never knew I needed." "Yeah," Asher said. "It is." Claire pointed at the sky. "Pretty." "Very pretty," Zara agreed. "Like you, sweet girl." They sat there until full dark, a family complete and whole, bound together by choice and love and shared struggle. The future stretched before them, uncertain, challenging, full of possibility. But they'd face it together, the way they faced everything. 2 years ago, Zara had stepped off a stagecoach into a nightmare, convinced her life was over. Now she sat on a porch she'd helped build, with a husband she loved and a daughter who was her heart walking around outside her body, and knew her life had only just begun. The journey from desperate bride to beloved wife and mother hadn't been easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But it had taught her something essential, that strength came from choosing to stand when falling seemed easier, that love grew from work and honesty and daily choice, that home wasn't a place you found but a life you built with your own hands. She'd come west seeking escape and found purpose. She'd accepted a marriage of convenience and discovered real love. She'd believed herself broken and learned she was resilient beyond measure. The frontier had been harsh and unforgiving, but it had also given her the space to become who she was meant to be. As the stars emerged overhead and Claire's head grew heavy against her shoulder, Zara felt profound gratitude, not for the path being easy, but for having the courage to walk it, for choosing to survive first, then to thrive, for opening herself to love when every instinct said to protect her heart, for building a life from nothing and making it extraordinary through sheer determination. Asher squeezed her hand and she looked at him, this quiet, steady man who'd taken a chance on a stranger and found a partner. He'd given her everything by asking for so little. He'd loved her into becoming herself. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come? About how grateful I am?" She smiled. "About how I'd do it all again, every hard moment, to end up right here." "Me too." He kissed her temple. "Every single moment." Claire stirred, mumbling in her sleep, and they carried her inside, tucking her into the crib she was rapidly outgrowing. They'd need to build her a proper bed soon, add another room to the house, maybe. There was always more work, more growth, more life unfolding. But that was tomorrow's concern. Tonight, Zara climbed into bed beside her husband, listened to her daughter's soft breathing in the next room, and let contentment wash over her like a benediction. She'd come west with nothing and built everything. She'd married a stranger and found her soulmate. She'd faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The scared, desperate woman who'd arrived in Hartwell was gone, transformed into someone stronger, braver, more whole. This was her story, hard-won and precious. This was her life, chosen and cherished. This was her home, built from courage and love and the stubborn refusal to surrender. And it was more than enough. It was everything.